Chapter 1479. Mo Qingfeng gently touched the shaped birthmark. Thinking back to the strange man's words, she was sure that this was the dragon-taming spiritual pearl that he was talking about. Mo Qingfeng frowned as the image of the terrifying man flashed through her mind. He said he would take her back, but where did he mean? Now, she hoped that he would appear so that they could talk things out. At this time, there was a burning pain from the birthmark. Mo Qingfeng looked down and saw that the birthmark was emitting different colors of light. It was very strange and mysterious. The 9 colors were alternating. As the colors changed, the bead birthmark was faintly discernible. It was as if it was going to jump out of her arm. Mo Qingfeng frowned. The pain was getting more and more intense. She had no choice but to touch the birthmark. When her index finger touched the birthmark, her body suddenly shook and her eyes flashed. When she calmed down and saw the scene in front of her, she couldn't help but be shocked. She had entered a space. In front of her, the scenery was picturesque. Birds were chirping and flowers were fragrant. The ground was emitting a faint white mist. Her figure shuttled through the mist. It was as if she was wandering in heaven. The space was not only like a fairyland. There was a spiritual spring and all kinds of spiritual herbs. Not far from the spiritual spring, there was a house built with red bricks and green tiles. Mo Qingfeng walked into the house. Her blood was boiling. The left side of the house was a storage room, and the right side was a laboratory for refining medicine. There were all kinds of tools, just like the laboratory in modern times. Seeing this, Mo Qingfeng's heart was pounding. She could not calm down for a long time. So many people had lost their lives for it. Now, she had it all. In recent years, there was a group of perverted people in K country. They were secretly researching a type of virus. This group of perverted people put the virus into a syringe and injected it into the streets. The people who were injected with the virus would not die immediately. They would be tortured to death. The situation was very miserable. This group of people was very capable. Mo Qingfeng spent a long time to find out their hideout. When they went back to their hideout for a meeting, she bombed their hideout. But she did not succeed in escaping and died. In the past few years, in order to research the virus developed by this group of perverted people, Mo Qingfeng was very familiar with all kinds of herbs. She also knew how to research medicine. This was taught to her by Migu. It could be said that in her world, she was loved by everyone. To think that he would be despised by everyone here. How hateful. Mo Qingfeng looked at everything in the space proudly. Now, she had all kinds of elixirs, spirit spring, and this laboratory. In this continent where the strong preyed on the weak, who could hurt her? Of course not. Because she wouldn't give them the chance. Whoever bullied her, she would bully them back. Coming out of the space, Mo Qingfeng changed into a set of white clothes and walked out from behind the screen. Bai Shuling, the maid who served Chu Mukin, had been waiting for her for a long time. Seeing Mo Qingfeng slowly walking out in white clothes, Bai Shuling's beautiful eyes couldn't help but flash slightly. Her clothes were whiter than snow, and she was as beautiful as a fairy. Unfortunately, that yin-yang face ruined her beauty. Your Highness. Bai Shuling respectfully called out to Mo Qingfeng. She was trained by Chu Mukin and was not as superficial as the concubines and maids in the residence who judged people by their appearance. In the past, the cowardly, incompetent, and submissive princess consort was indeed not likable. However, after what happened today, Bai Shuling's opinion of her had completely changed. Chapter 1480. In this continent where the strong preyed on the weak, although appearance was important, strength was the most important. It didn't matter if one was ugly, the most important thing was to be strong and not be bullied by others. Mo Qingfeng glanced at her, her indifferent eyes emotionless. Prepare some decent clothes for me. Clothes make the man. Her face was already ugly. If she didn't use clothes to decorate herself, wouldn't she be even uglier? Yes. Bai Shuling replied, then looked at the table. Princess, please have your meal. I'll take my leave now. Wait. Princess, what are your orders? Bai Shuling turned around and looked at her respectfully. Have you heard of the dragon taming spiritual pearl? Mo Qingfeng looked up and looked at her indifferently. Bai Shuling was startled. She never dared to ask about the whereabouts of the dragon taming spiritual pearl. Why did Princess ask about it? Princess, rumor has it that the dragon taming spiritual pearl is very strange. It's the family heirloom of the O family. Only the O family knows its whereabouts. You can leave. I'm asking about the dragon taming spiritual pearl. Don't tell Chu Mukin. Mo Qingfeng glanced at Bai Shuling, her cold eyes carrying a hint of warning. Yes, I understand. Late at night, in Chu Mukin's bedroom. Prince, according to your orders, I have burned all the bodies. Some of them died from their hearts exploding, and the rest died from poison. This poison. Chu Mukin's confidant, Du Wenjun, reported. Chu Mukin was lazily lying on the bamboo chair with his eyes closed. When he heard Du Wenjun's words, he only raised his eyebrows slightly. What poison? It's a type of poison that this subordinate has never seen before. This subordinate has carefully examined the corpses. Their necks all had a wound caused by a fingernail. The poison entered their bodies through the fingernail and quickly attacked their hearts. They didn't even have a chance to breathe. Imperial physician, he took the specimens to study, but he couldn't find out what poison it is. Chu Mukin opened his eyes and looked at Du Wenjun deeply. He said slowly, there's such a strong poison in the world. It kills immediately after entering the body. His left hand tapped on the side of the chair slowly. He frowned slightly and pondered for a moment. How did the hearts of the bodies explode? I've examined them. There's a purple footprint on their chests. They died from a kick. Chu Mukin's eyes flashed and looked at Du Wenjun. How is second madam's injury? The imperial physician said that his injuries are so severe that he won't be able to fully recover even after a month. Chu Mukin's eyes were cold. If he can't eat for a month, won't he starve to death? Du Wenjun pursed her lips and revealed an awkward expression, this. Your Highness, there are some words this subordinate doesn't know if I should say or not. Speak. This subordinate heard that when Prince wasn't in the Fu, Princess Consort was hungry and went to the kitchen to look for food. She was discovered by second madam and third madam and then violently beaten. After Princess Consort fainted, they even buried Princess Consort in the forest behind Coldwater Pavilion. Unexpectedly, not only did Princess Consort not die, she became a completely different person after waking up. They believe that the Princess Consort held a grudge against second madam, which was why she broke second madam's esophagus and wanted her to starve to death. How could he not know what happened when Chu Muqin was not in the Fu? The news of Mo Qingfeng being beaten to death was also spreading in the manor. As a prince, how could he not know? It was just that he didn't expect that Mo Qingfeng would actually change so much after waking up. He looked at Du Wenjun with an unfathomable gaze. Ben Wang knows. You can leave. After Du Wenjun left, Chu Mukin got up from the bamboo chair and walked to the window. He stood with his hands behind his back and thoughtfully looked at the night view outside the window. He sighed softly. Mo Qingfeng, what made you change so much? Or were you so powerful before, but you've been hiding your strength all these years? Chapter 1481. At the same time, Mo Qingfeng was soaking in the space's spirit spring. Several silver needles were inserted into her left cheek, shining with silver light. She had already carefully examined her face. The red and black birthmark on her left cheek was still salvageable. In fact, Mo Qingfeng's facial features were very beautiful. Aside from the mark on her left cheek, her face shape was quite delicate. She was beautiful beyond compare. Her skin was as white as snow, her eyebrows were like willow leaves, and her eyes were like streams. If she could make the mark on her left cheek fade away, she would definitely be a stunning beauty. For someone who was known as a divine doctor and was proficient in all kinds of secret medicines, it was not impossible for her to cure this yin-yang face. Moreover, with the help of the spiritual spring, she believed that in less than 2 months, the mark on the face would disappear. Coming out of the space, Mo Qingfeng directly laid down on the bed and closed her eyes to sleep. Just as she was about to fall asleep, she suddenly felt a strong murderous aura slowly approaching. As a top assassin, she was always vigilant. This murderous aura was very strong. Her eyes turned cold, and she heard light footsteps. The footsteps came from the roof, and the person who came was the devil who wanted to take her away. A fragrance suddenly spread in the room. Mo Qingfeng raised her eyebrows. Bewitching incense. In her previous life, she played with all kinds of poisons in her hands. How could this bewitching incense make her faint? She smiled faintly and held her breath. At this time, she heard the sound of tiles being removed. Soon, a black shadow came down from the roof like a ghost and landed silently beside the bed. In the darkness of the night, she could still feel the coldness of his body and the chilling murderous aura. He raised the dagger that was shining with cold light and was about to stab down. Who would have thought that before his hand could fall, he suddenly felt a grip on his neck. The person who was lying on the bed with his eyes closed suddenly sat up and grabbed his throat with one hand. A gloomy voice sounded in his ear, "Let's see if your dagger is faster or if my fingers are faster. As long as I exert more force, your neck will be broken." The 5 fingers on his neck were like a poisonous snake tightly strangling his neck. The black-clothed man's body stiffened. His eyes were as big as silver bells. He looked at Mo Qingfeng as if he was looking at a ghost. How could this be? One of the Rosen continent's 8 great bewitching fragrances, Mandala Heart Loss Powder, didn't make her fall. The man in black was very surprised. Even the movement of getting up was like the wind, and the hand that was strangling his throat was very strong. It was not like a weak and incompetent waist that had been raised in a boudoir all year round. Her speed was even faster than his, just like an assassin that had undergone cruel and strict training. "Speak. Who sent you to kill me?" As he spoke, the 5 fingers that were strangling his throat tightened even more. "As the most ruthless assassin, I will not reveal any information about my employer," the black-clothed man coldly said. As he spoke, his other hand quietly moved, preparing to shoot out the hidden weapon hidden in his sleeve. Assassin. The most ruthless killer. Why did she feel that he was the stupidest killer? Mo Qingfeng moved closer to him. In the dark night, he could vaguely see the corners of her lips curling up, forming a sinister and strange smile. "If I were you, I would obediently stay still. Do you believe that I can take your life before you even use your hidden weapon?" As she spoke, her fingernails had already dug into his flesh, causing him to feel a slight pain. The black-clothed man's heart shook. In the dark night, he was dressed in black. His movements were so light that she didn't even turn her eyes. How could she detect it? Chapter 1482. I'll ask you one more time. Who sent you? The hand that was grabbing his throat slowly went down. Her 5 fingers had already dug into his flesh. The black-clothed man felt the sinister aura coming from her body. If he didn't say anything, she would really kill him. But as an assassin, if the boss of the organization found out about his identity, he would also lose his life. You're not going to say it. Then there's no point in keeping you. You can just wait to die. With a bit of force, she pushed the black-clothed man away. The black-clothed man staggered back a few steps. He wanted to run away before Mo Qingfeng made a move, but as soon as he turned around, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. His legs cramped and he knelt down. In the end, he sat on the ground and looked at Mo Qingfeng in horror. Mo Qingfeng stood in front of him like a queen. The weak moonlight shone in from the window and added a bit of ruthlessness to her ugly face. As long as the blood coming out of your neck turns black, you will die. The cold voice sounded in the silent room, like a death knell. The man in black was so scared that his forehead was sweating. He reached out and touched his neck. Sure enough, there was a warm and sticky liquid flowing out. The sky was dark, so he couldn't tell if the blood was black or fresh. You poisoned me. The black-clothed man asked in a trembling voice. This woman could poison him from her fingernails. How sinister. I've researched a new poison and I'm still worried about not finding a suitable person to test it on. You came to me personally, so how could I let you go? No wonder. No wonder the soul-enchanting incense couldn't make you faint. Mo Qingfeng smiled contemptuously. You want to knock me out with just the devil's snare flower and orange jasmine. You. What kind of person are you? What do you want? The black-clothed man's voice trembled. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Why did he feel like this person in front of him wasn't the weak and useless seventh miss, but a demoness? Tell me, who sent you to kill me? In our line of work, revealing the identity of the employer is equivalent to ending your own life. You've already fallen into my hands. Do you think you can still see the sun tomorrow? If I tell you, can you protect me? If you don't tell me, you'll still die, Mo Qingfeng said coldly. How could such a cowardly person be qualified to be an assassin? The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment before stuttering, I don't know the details of the employer's identity. I only know that he is very familiar with the first madam of the Mo clan. Mo Qingfeng's eyes narrowed. Wasn't this identity detailed enough? To her, it was already very detailed. She didn't need to ask any further to know that it was the first madam of the Mo family who wanted to kill her. It turned out that the first madam of the Mo manor had heard about Yi Zhong's fight with the ghost today. The first madam wondered if this woman was really that powerful. If she was really that powerful, then this woman couldn't be left alive. Regardless of whether she was powerful or not, she could not keep her. The position of the eighth princess consort belonged to her precious daughter. A hint of viciousness flashed through Mo Qingfeng's eyes. Although she had been tortured in the Mo clan, the original body was very filial. If this didn't happen tonight, she would have completely forgotten about the Mo clan. Very well, since that Zhang Guilan wanted to play with her life, then she would play with her properly. Where's the antidote? The black-clothed man reached out and anxiously asked Mo Qingfeng for the antidote. I've already told you the employer's information. Can you let me go? I only study poisons, not antidotes. You. Chapter 1483. Her beautiful eyes turned cold as several silver needles shot out, aiming at the man's heart. The man's eyes widened, his limbs twitched, and he died just like that. Mo Qingfeng contemptuously glanced at the corpse and said disdainfully, You're an assassin. You're a disgrace to all assassins. The next morning, Mo Qingfeng was dressed in a purple robe. Her shiny black hair cascaded down her back. She wore a pink veil that covered her ugly face, only revealing a pair of clear eyes. She gracefully walked into the Missouri estate. Yes, that's right, she returned to her mother's home. Oh, isn't this seventh sister? A clear and melodious voice like a lark came from afar. Mo Qingfeng looked towards the direction of the voice, only to see a slender figure in a peony green dress walking over. The woman had a jade hairpin in her hair that shined brightly under the morning sun. She was the Mo estate's fifth young miss, Mo Zishan, the first madam's most precious daughter. Not only did she have a devastatingly beautiful face, but she was also well educated since young. She was proficient in the four arts and was a famous talent in the Chu-Qian country. Seeing Mo Zishan, Mo Qingfeng couldn't help but think of her dead sister. Her sister also had a devastatingly beautiful face and was also very intelligent. She was proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. 3 years ago, Prince Chu came to the Mo Manor and fell in love with her sister at first sight. He then discussed the marriage with Marquis Mo. But 7 days later, Mo Qingfeng saw the first madam's servant girl slashing her sister's face again and again with a knife until her skin was torn open. The disfigured sister couldn't bear such a heavy blow and committed suicide by jumping off the cliff. Thinking of this, Mo Qingfeng's eyes turned cold. She tightly pursed her lips and coldly looked at the approaching Mo Zishan. Mo Zishan came in front of Mo Qingfeng and looked at her from above. When she saw her clear and bright eyes, her heart tightened. When did this pair of eyes that were usually pale and empty become so bright? Could it be that what mother said was true, that she was different from before after her resurrection? Soon, Mo Zishan sneered and raised her chin slightly. Her arrogant eyes were filled with disdain and ridicule. Seventh sister, you're really special. Other people return home after 3 days of marriage, but you return home after half a year. Is it because you're living too well in the 8th prince's mansion that you've forgotten about your family? Why are you wearing a veil? Did you do something shameful? Or do you think this veil can cover your ugliness? From the moment Mo Qingfeng stepped into the Mo Manor, Mo Zishan had already noticed her. She was reciting poems in the pavilion in the garden when she saw a mysterious fairy-like woman wearing a veil walk in. She was wondering who it was, but when she heard her tell the guards that it was Mo Qingfeng, Mo Zishan immediately felt a little uncomfortable. She didn't expect that with a proper dress and veil, she would attract people's attention like a flower. If she didn't take off her veil, it would be easy for people to mistake her for a peerless beauty. Mo Zishan was jealous of Mo Qingfeng. From the first time she saw Chu Mukin, she fell in love with him at first sight. But the one who became his princess was this ugly Mo Qingfeng. Fifth sister, your mouth is getting smellier. No matter how much rouge and powder you put on, it can't cover up that stench. Mo Qingfeng glanced at her indifferently. Who didn't know how to mock people? She knew how to do it too. She came back today to do what her predecessor didn't dare to do. She wanted to teach Zhang Guilin a lesson. If she didn't show them her power, they would always think that she was easy to bully. Now that she was no longer the Mo Qingfeng of the past, since the heavens gave her a chance to be reborn, she must live a wonderful life. Those who bullied her in the past, now she will pay them back double. Mo Zishan was the apple of everyone's eye since she was young. No one had ever dared to speak loudly to her. She was so proud that she couldn't tolerate anyone saying no to her. After being provoked by Mo Qingfeng, her pretty little face turned pale. She was so angry that her eyes lit up. She pointed at Mo Qingfeng and cursed, "You bitch, you dare to say that my mouth is smelly, slap." Before she could finish scolding, Mo Qingfeng gave her a loud slap. Mo Zishan covered her burning face and looked at Mo Qingfeng in horror. This ugly person dared to hit her. She was her fifth sister. The servant girl Dong Shui was also stunned. She looked at Mo Qingfeng in disbelief. She dared to hit Miss Mo Qingfeng, you dare to hit me. Mo Zishan covered her face and screamed at her. So what if I hit you? Mo Qingfeng said coldly. Her eyes were cold. Try calling me bitch again. I'll hit you every time you do. A bitch is a bitch. Are you afraid of being called bitch? Zhang Guilan, who was dressed luxuriously, walked over aggressively. She didn't even dare to speak loudly to her precious daughter, but today she was slapped by this bitch. As a mother, how could she not be angry? Zhang Guilan hated Mo Qingfeng to begin with. If she didn't have an ugly face, she would have crippled her long ago. How could she still be alive now? Madam, you came at the right time. This ugly person came back and hit Miss like a madwoman. Miss' face is swollen. You have to help Miss. Dong Shui looked at Zhang Guilan as if she saw her savior. She quickly went up and said with a pitiful and scared expression. Zhang Guilan felt sorry for her precious daughter and hated Mo Qingfeng. She glared at Dong Shui, you can't even protect Mississippi. I'll teach you a lesson when we get back. Then she looked at Mo Qingfeng fiercely. Mo Qingfeng, you bitch. You dare to hit my daughter. Today I'll slap. Similarly, before she could finish, Mo Qingfeng took 2 steps forward and gave her a loud slap. This scene shocked Mo Zishan and Dong Shui. The servant girl who came with Zhang Guilan was also shocked. Mo Qingfeng, this bitch, when did she become so bold that she even dared to hit Madam? Zhang Guilan was the mistress of the Mo manor. All the concubines were respectful to her. Even Master Mo doted on her. She could do whatever she wanted in the manor. No one dared to say anything she said. Mo Qingfeng came back and hit her. Did she not want to live anymore? When Mo Qingfeng hit Mo Zishan, they couldn't believe what they saw was real. The timid 7th Miss not only dared to hit the 5th Miss, but now she even dared to hit Madam. This was really going against the heavens. Mo Qingfeng, you dare to hit me. I'm your aunt. How dare you hit me? It's fine if you killed your birth mother. Today, do you want to kill your aunt too? You unfilial bitch. You will have retribution. Ah, what are you doing? Zhang Guilan didn't finish scolding. Suddenly, she felt a cold sensation on her neck. Chapter 1484. When she was scolding Mo Qingfeng, Mo Qingfeng's figure was like the wind. She held a sharp knife to her neck and a sinister smile appeared on her face. She looked at her coldly. Since you like to call her a slut so much, then I'll fulfill your wish. Mo Qingfeng, what are you doing? Mo Zishan's expression changed as she glared at Mo Qingfeng. Wouldn't she know what she was going to do if she continued watching? She came today to avenge her sister and mother. She wasn't someone who procrastinated, and with the appearance of the assassin last night, her determination was even more ruthless. To deal with a scheming and vicious woman like Zhang Guilan, she had to be even more ruthless and cruel than her. Mo Qingfeng's hand moved gracefully as if she was dancing with a knife. At the same time, Zhang Guilan's shrill screams rang out and echoed through the sky. Mo Qingfeng, you. Mo Zishan saw her mother's face was disfigured and was furious, but she didn't dare to stop her. She could only shout for help. But the people who surrounded her were all kicked away by Mo Qingfeng. With such skills, who dared to approach? They didn't even see how Mo Qingfeng attacked and they were kicked away. She was still holding a knife to Zhang Guilan, which didn't affect her speed at all. Was this person wearing a veil in front of him really that weak and incompetent 7th young mistress? Mo Qingfeng only threw Zhang Guilan to Mo Zishan after writing the word slut on her face. Zhang Guilan was trembling from the pain. Her pretty face was now covered in blood. It was indescribably terrifying. Mo Qingfeng, you dare to treat me like this, you will suffer retribution. You should have thought that you would have a day like this when you let someone cut my sister's face. What you've encountered today is your retribution. Mo Qingfeng said coldly. Her body emitted a terrifying coldness. Zhang Guilan's dowry made Li Xiaoju's face suddenly turn pale and she couldn't stop trembling. You're talking nonsense. Zhang Guilan shouted in panic. She was the dignified first madam of the residence. How could she let this slut ruin her reputation? If they knew what she had done back then, wouldn't she become a cruel and merciless woman in their hearts? Mo Qingfeng's figure was like the wind. She immediately stood in front of Li Xiaoju with a cold smile. That smile was forcing Li Xiaoju to step by step into hell. Li Xiaoju was so scared that her legs went weak and she staggered back. I don't know anything. She took a step back and Mo Qingfeng took a step forward. I just wrote the word on Zhang Guilan's face. Don't. Li Xiaoju stumbled and fell to the ground. She was so scared that she covered her face with her hands and screamed. Mo Qingfeng squatted down in front of her and pinched her chin. Your face is far inferior to my sister's. Don't you think it's a pity to ruin it? No. Seventh young miss, please spare me. Back then, I had no choice but to do that. It was First Madam who forced me to do it. In the face of death, even the most ruthless person would be afraid. Mo Qingfeng's stern expression made her feel afraid. It made her feel that death was near. She had no choice but to tell her everything that Zhang Guilan forced her to do. And third madam, she didn't die because of you, seventh young mistress. She was. First madam was jealous that third madam was favored by old master. On the night third madam gave birth to you, she bribed the midwife. So, Xiaoju, what nonsense are you talking about? Zhang Guilan's face was covered in blood, and she struggled in Mo Zishan's arms to stop Li Xiaoju from continuing. However, the pain on her face and the anger in her heart made her limbs weak, and she couldn't move at all. I'm not talking nonsense. I'm really not. Li Xiaoju shook her head desperately. Everything she said was true. Of course I know you're not talking nonsense. I saw you cut my sister's face with a knife. Do you dare to talk nonsense? Mo Qingfeng said coldly. Her face was dark and scary. Zhang Guilan, you vicious woman. What did her mother do wrong? To kill her. What did her sister do wrong? To ruin her face. Zhang Guilan, who was still holding on to a glimmer of hope, heard Mo Qingfeng's words and her body went limp. She looked at Mo Qingfeng in horror. At that time, there was only her and Li Xiaoju in the room. She didn't expect her to see this scene. How scary was this little bitch to be able to hold it in for so long? I don't dare to talk nonsense. Li Xiaoju looked at Mo Qingfeng in fear. Her eyes seemed to be asking Mo Qingfeng if she could spare her life after telling the truth. It doesn't matter if a servant like you who betrays her master so easily stays alive. Mo Qingfeng's eyes turned cold. She raised her hand and the sharp knife cut Li Xiaoju's face. Li Xiaoju screamed in pain and fainted. Useless thing. My sister didn't faint when you cut her like that. I just cut you a few times and you're already unconscious. Mo Qingfeng threw away the knife and took out a handkerchief to wipe the blood off her hand. She glanced at the unconscious Li Xiaoju with disdain. Seeing this scene, Zhang Guilan's face twitched in pain. Her hatred for Mo Qingfeng turned into fear. She suddenly felt that Mo Qingfeng was a demon. A demon who came back for revenge. Mo Zishan was so scared that she fell to the ground. She had a bad feeling that the next one to be disfigured would be her. Seeing Li Xiaoju's perfect face turned into a ghastly mess after a few slashes from Mo Qingfeng, Mo Zishan would rather die than be disfigured like that. Mo Qingfeng walked slowly towards Mo Zishan with a faint cold smile. Although the veil covered her deadly cold smile, they could still feel a terrifying chill coming from her. She was like a female ghost that crawled out of hell. As she got closer, Mo Zishan became more and more frightened. Her beautiful face was pale and bloodless. Mo Qingfeng, don't mess around. Don't mess around. The pain made Zhang Guilan scared. Seeing Mo Qingfeng walk over like a ghost, she stood in front of her precious daughter to protect her. She stared at Mo Qingfeng in fear and anger. Her face was already disfigured. Her daughter's face couldn't be disfigured. If her daughter's face was disfigured, would they still have a place in the manor? Even if her face was disfigured, Marquis Mo wouldn't divorce her for her daughter's sake. Chapter 1485. Mo Qingfeng stepped on Zhang Guilan's thigh, causing her to grimace in pain and tremble. Let go. It hurts. It hurts. Zhang Guilan, do you want your legs broken or your precious daughter's face disfigured? Mo Qingfeng said coldly and stepped on Zhang Guilan, causing her to scream in pain. Mo Qingfeng, don't go too far. How dare you treat mother like this? Father won't let you go when he comes back. Mo Zishan hugged Zhang Guilan tightly and tried to pull her back, but she couldn't move the plump Zhang Guilan at all. She was scared out of her wits, but seeing Mo Qingfeng bullying her mother, she didn't know where the courage came from, but she shouted at Mo Qingfeng with a ferocious face, "You bitch, let go of my mother. If you don't let go, father won't let you go when he comes back. He won't let me go. He won't let me go. Tell me how he won't let me go. You killed my birth mother, killed my sister. I was bullied by you in the Mo Manor for 17 years, so what if I bully you once today? He won't let me go. I still want to settle the score with him." She came back today to teach them a lesson on behalf of the original owner, so she couldn't be soft. Besides, this group of people was not really her family. Her parents were in the 21st century, and they loved her as much as their lives. Alas, thinking of this, Mo Qingfeng was a little depressed. Her family must be very sad when she came here. At this time, there was a commotion behind her, so she didn't think too much about it. Since she was here, she might as well stay alive and have a chance to go back. They also heard the footsteps, and when they saw the person who came, their eyes lit up like a drowning person grabbing onto a life-saving straw. Marquis. Marquis is back. Mo Qingfeng stepped on Zhang Guilan's thigh and sneered. He really appeared at the right time. What are you doing? Marquis Mo's cold voice was like frost, and his sharp eyes fell on Mo Qingfeng's back. Brother Mukin, save us, seventh sister is going to kill people. She came back like a crazy woman and hit everyone she sees. Seeing Chu Mukin, Mo Zishan didn't care about Zhang Guilan anymore and rushed into Chu Mukin's arms. That anxious look was as if Chu Mukin was the husband she had been waiting for 1,000 years. After experiencing all kinds of hardships, he finally came. The moment she hugged Chu Mukin, she cried so pitifully that it was unknown how wrong she was. Mo Qingfeng exerted force with his foot and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. Zhang Guilan's knee was broken. Ah! Master! Master is in so much pain. Zhang Guilan hugged her knees with both hands and rolled on the ground in pain, crying and shouting. You unfilial daughter! Mo Fei quickly glanced at the messy scene. When he heard the sound of bones breaking, he was so angry that he quickly gathered a strong force in his palm and attacked Mo Qingfeng's back. Mo Qingfeng could feel the strong killing intent behind her back. she sneered. Just as the inner force was about to hit her, her figure flashed and she nimbly dodged the deadly cyclone. The cyclone hit the parasol tree not far away. The parasol tree that two people couldn't hug was cut down just like that. Mo Fei's eyes narrowed and his heart moved. Was this Mo Qingfeng in front of him? His angry and sharp eyes looked at the woman in front of him with surprise. Mo Qingfeng stood in front of him in a purple robe. The lips under the veil hooked up, revealing a cold smile. Her eyes were shockingly cold. At this time, she gave people a cold and stunning feeling. Seeing her like this, they all ignored her ugly face. She casually grabbed and a servant girl fell into her hand. The servant girl was trembling in fear and her face turned green. Tell the Marquis everything that Li Xiaoju said just now. Yes, yes, yes. This servant will say. This servant will say. Just now, Li Xiaoju said that it was First Madam who asked her to cut Fourth Mrs. Face with a knife and forced her to jump off the cliff to commit suicide. And when Third Madam gave birth to you, First Madam asked the midwife to kill Third Madam and then said that she died of dystocia. Li Xiaoju said this. Very good. Mo Qingfeng let go of the servant girl. The servant girl was so scared that her legs went soft and she fell to the ground. She was really afraid that she would end up like Li Xiaoju. No, it's not like this. Mo Zishan looked up at Chu Mukin with tears in her eyes. Big brother Mukin, you must get justice for my mother. She didn't do anything to harm anyone. She choked with sobs and said, Big brother Mukin, you must get justice for my mother. She didn't do anything to harm anyone. Chu Muchen's eyes fell on Mo Qingfeng from the moment he came in. She was so attractive in this dress. What made him feel even more incredulous was that she could dodge Mo Fei's attack so easily. Was she still the Mo Qingfeng from before? Even if she came back from the dead, she couldn't have become so powerful. Or was she not the ugly person from before at all? Mo Qingfeng smiled and looked coldly at Mo Zishan. Her eyes were full of disgust. Mo Zishan, if you show this kind of appearance again, do you believe that I won't find someone to fuck you? She couldn't stand this kind of vicious and pretentious woman. Mo Zishan's face changed and she felt even more wronged. Brother Mu Qin, Chu Mu Qin just glanced at her coldly. He was too focused on Mo Qingfeng just now and forgot to push her away when this woman threw herself into his arms. Now that he saw her sticking to his arms, his eyes turned cold and he picked her up like a rabbit. Brother Mu Qin. Mo Zishan pouted her lips in dissatisfaction. Her most beloved brother Mu Qin could even marry Mo Qingfeng, this ugly woman, and even gave her the position of princess consort. Why couldn't he marry her as a concubine? Didn't he know that she had always liked him? Shameless woman. Mo Qingfeng looked at Mo Zishan contemptuously, her cold voice full of contempt. Mo Qingfeng, who gave you the courage to come and stir up trouble? Marquis Mo Fei's eyes were bloodshot and his masculine and somewhat handsome face was frighteningly gloomy. Mo Qingfeng's eyes coldly glanced at Zhang Guilan who was lying on the ground and making muffled sounds of pain. She said coldly, to be precise, First Madam gave me the courage. If she didn't hire assassins from Kuqing Lu to assassinate me, would I have the courage to come back and get even with her? Zhang Guilan who was rolling on the ground suddenly shouted, You're slandering me. I didn't do this. Ah, my face hurts. Chu Muchen glanced at Zhang Guilan who didn't care about her image and his body suddenly emitted a shocking coldness. No matter how ugly Mo Qingfeng was, she was still his princess in name. She actually hired assassins to assassinate him. Then, a faint light flashed through his deep eyes and he looked at Mo Qingfeng. Even Kuqing Lu's assassins couldn't do anything to her. What kind of woman was she? Mo Zishan looked at Chu Mu-chin and saw his handsome face was gloomy. She was shocked and hurriedly said, "Brother Mu-chin, what she said is all a lie. Don't believe her. Whether it's true or not, you can go to Kuching Lu to check and see if they've received an order to kill Mo Qingfeng." Mo Qingfeng said. "Even if Kuching Lu received this order, it's because you've offended too many people and there are too many people who want you dead." Mo Zishan said. Mo Qingfeng's cold gaze swept over and Mo Zishan's heart trembled. She took a few steps closer to Chu Mu-chin and thought that with Chu Mu-chin protecting her, she didn't believe that Mo Qingfeng would dare to bully her. Mo Qingfeng smiled and said coldly, "Mo Zishan, it seems that I was too kind to you just now." Then, she stepped closer to Mo Zishan step by step. "Mo Qingfeng, what do you want to do? Isn't it enough that you beat them up like this?" Mo Fei suddenly stopped her and stood in front of her, looking at her sternly. After all, he was the master of the Mo manor and her father. Her arrogance made him very angry. "Enough. I'm already very merciful that I didn't take their lives. Is this enough? If my mother and sister were standing here, would you dare to say it's enough? Today, I came back for revenge. Zhang Guilin ruined my sister's face, so I'm going to ruin her daughter's face now." "You." Mo Fei gritted his teeth in anger. "Mo Qingfeng, Zishan is your sister." Mo Qingfeng smiled coldly and slowly moved her face closer to Mo Fei. All she saw was Mo Fei's angry face. "If I remember correctly, not long after the Empress Dowager died, you went to the 8th Marquis Manor and said that you wanted to cut off your relationship with me. Now, I'm no longer a member of the Mo Manor, you're no longer my father, Mo Zishan is no longer my sister. I have nothing to do with the Mo Manor." Her orchid-like breath sprayed on Mo Fei's face. Mo Fei smelled a faint fragrance and thought it was her scent. Mo Qingfeng's words made him tremble with anger. "Mo Qingfeng, you unfilial daughter." Mo Qingfeng stared at him for a moment and suddenly smiled. "It's you who made me unfilial. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not teaching your daughter well. Today's revenge ends here. If you still can't forget me, I'll patiently play with you slowly." With that, she did not even glance at Chu Mu-kin, heading straight for the entrance of the Mo clan. A gentle breeze blew past, causing her purple dress to flutter. Her black hair danced in the wind, leaving behind a stunning purple scene. Just as she said, today was the end of it. The disfigured Zhang Guilin would live a life worse than death in the future, so Mo Zishan decided to spare her life. If she provoked her again, she wouldn't be so polite anymore. As for Mo Fei, Mo Qingfeng thought, he probably didn't have many days to live after inhaling the fragrance of her breath. Since she was able to live again, she would no longer live as cowardly as she did before. At this moment, an enormous ferocious blood bat stopped in the air and flapped its wings. On its back stood a tall and cold figure. His green clothes fluttered in the wind, and his long and narrow eyes emitted a cold and deep brilliance as he stared at the purple figure that was gradually disappearing into the distance with a complicated expression. Mo Qingfeng seemed to feel the scorching gaze of a god, and there seemed to be a cold and familiar breath condensed around her. She suddenly stopped and turned to look in the direction of the iron-blooded bat. She frowned slightly. Except for some dazzling sunlight, she didn't see anything in the void. Was she being paranoid? Was her feeling wrong? Why did she feel that there was a gaze following her? Could it be him, that Dugazinen? Dugazinen, who was standing on the back of the ferocious blood bat for a long time, was slightly surprised. A glimmer of light appeared in his cold eyes and the corners of his mouth rose slightly, forming a shallow arc. At this moment, it was as if 100 flowers were vying to be the most beautiful around him. Even the sun had become dim and colorless. She could feel his presence like this. It was really not simple. Back at the cold water pavilion, Mo Qingfeng saw the rooster that she went through the wedding ceremony with sleeping on the table. Her appearance seemed to have disturbed its sleep. The rooster immediately opened its eyes and looked at Mo Qingfeng. Seeing that it was its master, its small eyes became even brighter. "World dominators, are you hungry?" Mo Qingfeng came to the table and sat down. She gently stroked the rooster's glossy feathers. She named it World Dominators. When they went through the wedding ceremony, it was still an ordinary rooster with dull feathers. She kept feeding its spirit spring water, and its feathers began to change. It became glossy and had a hint of emerald green. The rooster's comb became redder and its feet turned golden. Right now, it was like a sunny young man wearing a brocade robe. After drinking spirit spring water for 3 days, Mo Qingfeng was surprised to find that the rooster seemed to understand her words. When she spoke, it would respond to her either by flapping its wings or nodding its head. Its small eyes were especially bright and moving, just like a spiritual rooster. World Dominators pecked Mo Qingfeng's palm a few times. Mo Qingfeng smiled and said, "You greedy brat. I gave you a big bowl of spirit spring water this morning, and you still want more. Seeing that I'm in a good mood today, I'll bring you into the space and let you drink as much as you want." When World Dominators heard this, it happily flapped its wings and called out, "Oh, oh, oh, oh," like a very happy child. "Do you know what I just did? I went for revenge. I swore that I would make Zhang Guilan's life worse than death. As for that Mo Fei who wanted to kick me out of the house, I will slowly torture him and make him beg for death." Mo Qingfeng held World Dominators in her arms and gently stroked its glossy feathers. Her cold eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. "World Dominators, I will never let anyone bully us again. Anyone who bullies us will have to live a life worse than death." She originally wanted to end Zhang Guilan and Mo Fei's lives with one strike, but that would be letting them off too easily. She definitely wouldn't let them die so easily. She wanted them to experience unprecedented pain and let them die slowly. "Oh, oh, oh." World Dominators called out a few times and rubbed its head against Mo Qingfeng's arm as if it was comforting her, encouraging her, and agreeing with her. Mo Qingfeng smiled and her cold eyes became gentle. She looked down at the rooster in her arms and said softly, "Let's go into the space now." World Dominators nodded happily. Mo Qingfeng hugged World Dominators and murmured, "If only I could talk to Daddy and Mommy when I'm in the space. If I let them know that I'm doing well here and bully people, they will definitely praise me for being capable." Chapter 1486. Inside the space, a wooden basin was filled with spirit spring water. Ordinary chickens couldn't swim, but Dominators was special. It was like a swan in silk, swimming, bathing, and drinking in the spirit spring water. This was its little world. On the other side, Mo Qingfeng was soaking in the spirit spring water. Her veil had been taken off, and the red spot left by the needle was much better after applying the anti-inflammatory and revitalizing ointment. Soaking in the spirit spring water, the mark was obviously lighter. She believed that if she took the anti-inflammatory and revitalizing ointment, and then applied the needle every other day, and soaked in the spirit spring water every day, this ugly mark would completely disappear in less than half a month. After soaking in the spirit spring water, Mo Qingfeng entered the laboratory to study various secret medicines. If she wanted to survive in Rosen Continent, she had to rely on this laboratory to refine more secret medicines. The secret medicines she researched were divided into 2 types. One was good medicine, which could cure various diseases, and the other was poison, which could kill people. Mo Qingfeng's research on medicine was quite exquisite. After Magoo knew that she wanted to be a special forces soldier, he taught her very seriously. Moreover, Song Wuyo also taught her some Chinese medicine. She also learned a lot. She didn't expect that what she learned would be useful here. These days, relying on the original owner's memory, she figured out the situation of this world. She was very clear that in this era, there were good medicines that sold well, and there were poisons that couldn't be prevented. She could hide poisons in any part of her body. As long as she was ruthless enough, her position in this world would be stable. For several days, Mo Qingfeng spent her time in the space and the cold water pavilion. She didn't step out of the pavilion. Today, when she came out of the space, it was already night. Tonight, the 8th prince's mansion was different from the usual night. Tonight, it was brightly lit, illuminating the courtyard of the cold water pavilion. Mo Qingfeng stood in the front yard, but she felt a cold wind and rain coming from the main hall. What happened? Mo Qingfeng frowned. She carried Dominators out of the cold water pavilion and walked along the corridor to the main hall. In the corridor, she met a hurried servant girl. The servant girl saw her and trembled in fear. Wang Fei, the news that Mo Qingfeng had killed more than 20 men like a ghost had spread like wildfire. Now, in the entire 8th Lord's residence, those who had bullied her before would be frightened when they saw her. They were afraid that they would end up like Yi Qingyun. What happened? Mo Qingfeng grabbed the servant girl and glanced at the main hall. Your Highness, First Madam. First Madam, Mo Qingfeng raised an eyebrow, dead? The servant girl kept nodding her head. She was so scared that her face turned green. Mo Qingfeng let go of her and said coldly, "Go do your work." Mo Qingfeng smiled disdainfully. It hadn't even been 7 days yet, and he was already starving to death. It was not fun to die so easily. Since Yi Qingyun was dead, there was no need for her to join in the fun. She casually strolled around nearby. The night sky was so beautiful. Chu Mukin. Mo Qingfeng stopped in his tracks and his face turned cold. Beside the lotus pond, Chu Mukin stood there in a white robe. His figure was tall and straight. When the night wind blew, his robe danced in the wind, like the faint flowing water in the night sky. Mo Qingfeng turned to leave. Chu Mukin suddenly turned around and a cold and ruthless voice came from behind her. Mo Qingfeng, you are so vicious. A good person was tortured to death by you. Are you happy now? Mo Qingfeng slowly turned around and looked at the cold and indifferent Chu Mukin. She did not wear a veil, and the left side of her face was smeared with anti-inflammatory ointment. The color was darker than the original birthmark. At this time, she looked even uglier. The cold light flashed in her eyes, which made Chu Mukin very unhappy. 8th Lord, you have to think before you speak. What do you mean by tortured to death by me? If it weren't for my luck, I think I would have been buried in the back of the forest. Now my body would have rotted. How would I have the chance to stand here and talk to you? I know that 8th Lord has always doted on Yi Qingyun. Now that she has become a starving ghost, you are very sad and heartbroken. I understand this very well. But I want to ask you, her life is a life, and my life is not a life. She stepped forward and walked lightly in front of Chu Mukin. Her cold eyes changed and looked at him coquettishly. She stretched out her slender fingers and gently poked his heart. Chu Mukin's heart thumped. He looked at her with a deep face. Her eyes and actions made him very unhappy. Mo Qingfeng looked up and stared at him deeply. Lord, if I don't come back to life, and you know that it was Yi Qingyun and Zhao Minjing who killed me, will you run in front of them and scold them and say that they are cruel? Chu Mukin's eyes deepened. Will he? Will he run in front of them and say that they are cruel? Probably not. What does Mo Qingfeng's life have to do with him? Seeing that he did not speak, Mo Qingfeng sighed in disappointment and said sadly, "Sigh, I know that in your heart, my life is not a human life at all. You must be thinking that my life and death has nothing to do with you. I am just an ugly person." Chu Mukin was startled. He raised his eyebrows and looked at her indifferently. She knew what he was thinking. Indeed, what does her life and death have to do with him? Mo Qingfeng's expression changed and quickly returned to her original indifference. Her cold eyes looked at Chu Mukin with a hint of disgust and said fiercely, "I don't care if I am in other people's hearts or not. In my heart, my life is more important than the sky. If others don't offend me, I will never offend them. If others offend me, I will never forgive them. Eighth Lord, even if in your heart, my life is like grass, you can't say that I am cruel. If Yi Qingyun knew her place in the palace and did not offend me, I would never treat her like this. Also, you have no right to say how cruel and heartless I am. I can't even control my own woman. The person who is crueler is you, not me. Don't pretend to be a saint in front of me. If you feel sorry for Yi Qingyun, then go to the morning hall to wait for her. Don't blame me." Mo Qingfeng, what kind of attitude is this? Chu Mukin looked at her coldly. In the end, he was the eighth lord, her husband. Her husband was the sky. Even if he was wrong, she should not speak to him with such a tone and attitude. Other than his mother, even the deceased Empress Dowager had never been disrespectful to him. Mo Qingfeng smiled coldly, "I have the same attitude as you. As the saying goes, don't hit a smiling person. Since you have a good attitude towards me, my attitude towards you will naturally not be bad. Mo Qingfeng, this king is your husband, please be more respectful to this king. Otherwise, you will suffer in the future." Chu Mukin said unhappily. Mo Qingfeng found it funny. This was the funniest joke she had heard since she transmigrated here. She stroked the rooster in her arms and looked at Chu Mukin with a cold gaze. "You admit that you are my husband? But I don't admit that you are my husband. I don't have to respect you. Have you forgotten? I was married to it, and it was the one who accompanied me on our wedding night. As for whether I will suffer in the future, it is not up to you to decide." Chapter 1487. As she spoke, Mo Qingfeng lowered her head and gently looked at dominators of the world. Then, she raised her eyes and the corner of her lips slightly raised, revealing a faint sneer. She looked coldly at Chu Mukin. Others didn't respect her, so why should she respect others? Besides, he wasn't God and had no right to decide her life. It was true that she had never acknowledged Chu Mukin as her husband. Chu Mukin's appearance was out of this world and could cause the downfall of a country, but he was not her dish. Not to mention the wedding night, he did not even appear during the wedding ceremony. It was the rooster in her arms that took his place, making her the laughingstock of Chu Qiangua. She was already very merciful to such a man if she did not end his life. It was also because of him that Yi Qingyun dared to disrespect her and teamed up with Zhao Minjing to bully her. When Chu Mukin heard this, his cold face suddenly became gloomy. His eyes burned like fire as he looked at World Dominator in her arms. World Dominator was also looking at him. Its small eyes had a fierce light as it looked at him provocatively. Chu Mukin was slightly shocked. Was this the same rooster she went through the wedding ceremony with? Why didn't it look like it at all? Although he wasn't present during the wedding ceremony, he had seen the entire process. He had asked Zhao Minjing to catch this rooster. It was an ordinary rooster, but the rooster in her arms had bright feathers. Its legs were like gold, and the light it emitted was particularly dazzling. Especially its two eyes, which blinked one after another, could express all of its emotions. Also, its beak was as sharp as a knife, which could be used to kill people. This wasn't the original rooster. Where did this monster come from? Chu Mukin looked at World Dominator and asked coldly. It's not a monster. It's my husband. As for where it came from, you have to ask 8th Wangye. Didn't you arrange for it to be married to me? At this time, there was the sound of hurried footsteps not far away. Chu Mukin looked up and saw Du Wenjun. Mo Qingfeng turned around and saw Du Wenjun walking towards her. She smiled gently and looked back at Chu Mukin. 8th Wangye, your subordinate came in a hurry. It seems that she has something urgent to talk to you about. I'll go back and rest first. Chu Mukin pursed his lips tightly and looked at Mo Qingfeng's back with a gloomy gaze. His deep eyes didn't show any emotion. Du Wenjun saw Mo Qingfeng and slowed down his pace. His eyes were attracted by the rooster in her arms. In the dark night, the rooster seemed to be shrouded in a layer of magical light. He was also puzzled. Was this the rooster that married her? When Mo Qingfeng passed by him, she didn't even look at him. She walked towards the cold water pavilion step by step, leaving behind a fragrant scent. Du Wenjun's mind shook. Your Highness, everything is ready. Du Wenjun walked in front of Chu Mukin and saw that he was looking at Mo Qingfeng's back. Is the rooster she's hugging really the one this prince found for her? Chu Mukin said faintly, let Bai Shuling serve her and monitor her every move. If anything out of the ordinary happens, report it to me immediately. Yes. Du Wenjun answered affirmatively. Only the rooster accompanied the princess all the time. Du Wenjun looked at Chu Mukin, and her eyes flashed. She said, Your Highness, the second madam's funeral is about to begin. Chu Mukin retracted his gaze from Mo Qingfeng's back and glanced at Du Wenjun indifferently. Then, he raised his head and looked deeply at the sky. His cold face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. The coldness in his eyes was so cold that it made people's hearts tremble. Mo Qingfeng stayed in the space for a few days. Recently, she was studying a kind of goo poison. Seeing that the goo poison was improving every day, she was in a very good mood. She insisted on soaking in the spirit spring every day for a few hours. She found that after soaking in the spirit spring, her internal strength increased very quickly. Her body was as light as a swallow and her eyes and ears were very sharp. Other than soaking in the spirit spring and studying poisons, she also liked to exercise. This body was a bit weak. She wanted to make herself stronger, so she had to have a healthy and strong body. Only with a good body could she have a better foothold in this world. So she used the special and cruel methods from her previous life to train this body every day. In the beginning, this body couldn't take it, but slowly, this body didn't feel the fatigue and pain. In the end, she felt very refreshed. The more she trained, the higher her spirit became. The morning sun shone softly on the earth. After breakfast, Mo Qingfeng carried world dominators and walked slowly in the back of the forest. The sun shone through the leaves and fell on her snow-white clothes, making her look like a fairy walking out of the mist. Kakik. World dominators in her arms suddenly flapped its wings and cried out. It was like playing a piano, crisp and pleasant to the ear. Mo Qingfeng seemed to understand what it meant. She let go of it and world dominators spread its wings and flew away. Mo Qingfeng was startled. She looked up at world dominators. She thought it was going to walk on the ground, but she didn't expect it to spread its wings and fly. Suddenly, she smiled. It wasn't an ordinary rooster. Maybe it used to be an ordinary rooster, but after drinking her spirit spring, it became extraordinary. 9 Dragon Ball space was really a good thing. It always brought her unexpected surprises. World Dominators spread its wings and flew. She also wanted to test her skills. She lightly stepped on the ground and her body was as light as a swallow. She leaped onto a tree branch and looked down. She felt a sense of accomplishment as if she had climbed to the 9th layer of heaven and looked down on the world. This feeling was really good. Mo Qingfeng leaned against a tree branch and enjoyed the soft sunlight and the sweet morning breeze. At this time, there was a slight sound of footsteps not far away. Mo Qingfeng's face darkened as he looked in the direction of the sound. The person who came was Bai Shuling, a special maid that Chu Mukin placed beside her to monitor her every move. World dominators also sensed that someone was approaching. It silently flew back into Mo Qingfeng's arms and looked at Bai Shuling, who was walking over with displeasure. Mo Qingfeng wasn't a fool, and Bai Shuling was trained by Chu Mukin. Of course, she knew why Bai Shuling came to Coldwater Pavilion. She just didn't say anything. She wanted to monitor her every move. Was it that easy? During the day, she either slept or walked around the mountain. When it was dark, she would close the curtain and rest. Bai Shuling thought she was sleeping in her bedroom. In fact, she brought world dominators into the space, so Bai Shuling's surveillance didn't affect her at all. However, she saw an eyesore when she came out of the space. She wanted to make a move on her several times, but after thinking about it carefully, she decided not to. If she got rid of Bai Shuling, there would be another Bai Shuling sent to Coldwater Pavilion. What did Bai Shuling do wrong? She was just taking someone's money to get rid of them. Besides, Bai Shuling came to Coldwater Pavilion and served her very well. At least the food she ate was much better than before. Chapter 1488. Where did the princess go? Bai Shuling mumbled to herself. Today was Chu Mukin's birthday, and the birthday banquet would be held starting from 5 p.m. Yesterday, Chu Mukin didn't even think of letting Mo Qingfeng attend the banquet. He felt that her ugly appearance was a kind of humiliation to him. Her appearance would only make him lose face in front of all the high-ranking officials. But today, Chu Mukin was crazy and asked Mo Qingfeng to attend the banquet. Bai Shuling was anxious to tell her this news, but she couldn't find her. Why are you looking for me? Just as Bai Shuling was about to close her eyes to feel Mo Qingfeng's breath, Mo Qingfeng jumped down lightly and stood silently behind Bai Shuling. Her voice was not loud, but it made Bai Shuling's body tremble. She jumped in fright, her heart thumping wildly. She abruptly turned around, surprised and happy, and then looked at Mo Qingfeng in confusion. Princess consort, just now you. Mo Qingfeng raised her eyebrows, and her face was extremely cold. It seemed that she was in a bad mood. How could she be in a good mood when she saw an eyesore? I hid in front of the tree and deliberately played hide and seek with you. Why are you so nervous when you don't see me for a while? Is Chu Mukin that worried about me? Today is the prince's birthday, and the birthday banquet will be held from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. The prince wants to invite the princess to attend the banquet, and he sent me to inform the princess. Bai Shuling felt a cold aura gather around her, and when she saw Mo Qingfeng's cold face, her heart couldn't help but shiver. She looked at her with slight fear. Mo Qingfeng's voice was as cold as ice. What if I don't attend? What did Chu Mukin's birthday have to do with her? She didn't want to give him a gift, and she didn't want to wish him a happy birthday. As the prince's princess, the princess should attend the prince's birthday. Bai Shuling said softly, afraid that Mo Qingfeng would slap her. When Mo Qingfeng heard this, she sneered. She never admitted that she was Chu Mukin's consort. She stroked dominating the world and looked at Bai Shuling coldly. The one who married me is the rooster in my arms. If Chu Mukin admits that I'm his consort, then he's a rooster. Unfortunately, in my heart, he can't even compare to a rooster. Bai Shuling's expression changed slightly. She looked at Mo Qingfeng in surprise, then looked at world dominators in her arms. Princess consort, His Highness had no choice at that time. All right, I'll attend his birthday party. Mo Qingfeng interrupted by Shuling's words coldly. What bullshit, she had no choice. If she wanted to find an excuse, she should at least find a better one, right? Back then, someone held a knife to Chu Mukin's neck and forced him not to go through the wedding ceremony with her. He was the 8th Wangya, who dared to put a knife on his neck. Mo Qingfeng's cold eyes were full of disdain and mockery. Can't help yourself. Since Chu Mukin gave her face and invited her to his birthday banquet, how could she not give him face? It was Chu Mukin's birthday banquet. The entire 8th Lord's mansion was extremely lively and grand. In addition to the ministers of the imperial court, there were also a few princesses. There were also some close and distant relatives and friends of the martial world. When the banquet started, everyone took their seats and drank to their heart's content. Although Mo Qingfeng was the princess consort, Chu Mukin sat on the main seat in the main hall. The side seat beside him was occupied by Zhao Minjing. Obviously, her status in the 8th Lord's mansion was not as high as Zhao Minjing's. To be precise, in Chu Mukin's heart, she was not the princess consort at all. She was not qualified to sit in the position of the hostess. Mo Qingfeng also did not care about the position of the hostess of the 8th Lord's mansion. She did not care about being Chu Mukin's princess consort. Sooner or later, she would leave the 8th Lord's mansion. Today, she was wearing a silver-red brocade dress embroidered with a mutant flower. She wore a red veil, revealing a pair of bright and cold beautiful eyes. Dressed like this, she was not only bright and moving, but also exuded an innate domineering and cold aura. Sitting opposite her was Princess Ming's eldest son, Yuding. He was the famous playboy of Chu Qiangua. When Mo Qingfeng appeared, his eyes did not leave her. Mo Qingfeng's dress was not luxurious. It was not as luxurious as Zhao Minjing and the princesses. But the aura on her body made people unable to look away. Even Chu Mukin was attracted by her dress and stared at her for a moment. Mo Zishan, who had dressed up meticulously, couldn't attract Ogwuding's attention. Seeing Chu Mukin's gaze shift to Mo Qingfeng from time to time, and Ogwuding staring at her without blinking, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down from time to time, and that hungry look of swallowing saliva, Mo Zishan felt a sense of jealousy in her heart. She was clearly an extremely ugly woman. How could a veil cover her ugliness? How could an ugly woman attract the attention of all the men present? Did she have the smell of a fox on her? When the wine and food were served, Mo Qingfeng ignored everyone's gaze and leisurely ate the grapes. She enjoyed the dance on the stage. The grapes were delicious, but the dance was not very good. The grapes on the table were quickly finished by her. She glanced at the various dishes on the table. It was better to drink. She picked up the wine jug and poured a full cup for herself. She lifted the veil with one hand and held the wine cup with the other. She slightly raised her head and took a sip of the wine. She frowned. This wine was so strong. Her gentle movements were so elegant. Yuding was drooling. Especially her slender jade fingers, which were whiter than the finest white porcelain. The bright red at the tip of her fingers made his throat tighten. Mo Qingfeng could feel the burning desire in his eyes. He just glanced at him coldly and frowned even more. The wine was still in his mouth and he didn't swallow it. He looked around coldly. This wine was poisonous. With the wine in her mouth, Mo Qingfeng keenly smelled an aphrodisiac. She looked around and they drank happily. The wine was changed one pot after another. She glanced at Chu Mukin, who was sitting on the high seat. At this time, his brothers were toasting him, and Zhao Minjing, who was beside him, was looking at him with a smile, her eyes full of affection. Mo Qingfeng smiled. He asked her to attend the birthday banquet just to mess with her like this. She slowly swallowed the wine in her mouth and curled her lips. The drug was too weak. If she wanted to mess with someone, she would definitely use the strongest drug. She poured another cup and drank it. She unintentionally looked at Mo Zishan. Mo Zishan happened to be looking at Mo Qingfeng. When they met Mo Qingfeng's gaze, she looked away evasively. Mo Qingfeng drank 4 cups in a row. She looked at Mo Zishan with a smile. What a vicious woman. It was not enough to bully her in the Mo mansion. Now she wanted to bully her in the 8th Lord's mansion. After drinking a few cups of wine, Mo Qingfeng's cold and beautiful eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist. It was both charming and mysterious. Jiding had the urge to take off her veil and see her true appearance. Chapter 1489. The wine was already strong, and it was also drugged with aphrodisiac. In the blink of an eye, Mo Qingfeng felt her face and body begin to heat up. It was very uncomfortable. She got up and walked out of the lively hall. Chu Mukin, who was sitting on the main seat, inadvertently looked over. Seeing her leave, his eyes suddenly became cold. When he saw Guiding's lecherous eyes following her figure, his handsome face suddenly became more sinister. The air outside was better, and the cool breeze blew by, feeling very comfortable. Mo Qingfeng took out a pill from her waist and put it into her mouth. This was a pill that could cure thousands of poisons. For such a weak aphrodisiac, taking one was more than enough. As soon as she chewed, her keen nose smelled a rouge smell. Mo Zishan stood not far behind her, observing her situation. Mo Qingfeng smiled coldly, and a cold light flashed through her beautiful eyes. She wanted to see what kind of show Mo Zishan had arranged for her. Mo Qingfeng pretended to be very uncomfortable, dragging her heavy steps to the cold water pavilion. Her body was shaking more and more. When she was about to reach the cold water pavilion, this section of the road was relatively remote, and no one usually came close. It's so hot. Mo Qingfeng held the pillar with one hand and pulled the collar with the other. Just looking from the back, one could feel that she was very uncomfortable. Mo Zishan, who was quietly following behind her, saw that the more uncomfortable she was, the more proud she was. The aphrodisiac was taking effect, and the show was about to begin. A ruthless smile appeared on her beautiful face, and she secretly scolded, Mo Qingfeng, let's see how long you can be arrogant. You made my mother live a life worse than death. You humiliated me, and today I will pay you back double. Mo Qingfeng stumbled back to the cold water pavilion. Her clothes were torn apart by her, and even the veil was torn off, revealing a very ugly yin-yang face. Back in the room, she didn't even close the door and fell on the bed, pretending to be unconscious. Someone was approaching. Listening to the footsteps, it was 2 people. At this time, Mo Zishan's voice sounded in her ear, "Go and tell the 3rd madam that I'm done. Let her do it quickly." Yes. The person who responded was Mo Zishan's personal maid. Mo Qingfeng heard the sound of hurried footsteps and smelled the pungent smell of rouge powder. Mo Zishan stood in front of the bed and looked down at Mo Qingfeng with a cold and vicious gaze. Mo Qingfeng, you didn't expect this, right? This time, I will play you to death and make you have no place in Chu Qiangua. I'll let you lose all your face. You didn't expect that either, did you? Mo Qingfeng suddenly opened his eyes, stretched out his arm, and tapped Mo Zishan's chest. Mo Zishan was shocked, and her eyes were bigger than eggs. You, Mo Qingfeng had hit her acupoints, and now she couldn't even move. How could this be? She clearly saw her drinking 4 cups of wine in a row, and walking all the way from the main hall. She was so uncomfortable. Mo Zishan looked at Mo Qingfeng in surprise. She sat up calmly, as if she was not poisoned at all. Mo Zishan was shocked. How could this be? Could it be that his eyes were playing tricks on him? Was everything that was happening before his eyes not real? Mo-Zishan, you're too inexperienced to play tricks with me. If you want to play with me, you're not qualified. Mo Qingfeng pinched Mo-Zishan's chin and patted her face lightly. He smiled coldly. Do you want to know what an aphrodisiac is? I'll give you a strong aphrodisiac now. With that, Mo Qingfeng held a black pill between his fingers and sent it into Mo Zishan's mouth under the horrified gaze of Mo Zishan. His slender fingers tapped her chest again, and the pill was swallowed down her throat. You! Mo Qingfeng, what did you give me? Mo Zishan's eyes were filled with fear and anger as she glared fiercely at Mo Qingfeng. I'll give you whatever you gave me. But my aphrodisiac is much stronger than the one you gave me. The aphrodisiac will take effect in a quarter of an hour, and your will become more and more blurred. At that time, you won't know how unrestrained and flirtatious you are. Only the spectators will know. Mo Qingfeng's voice was as cold as ice. Her phoenix eyes were sharp, and the innate coldness on her body was bone-chilling. Mo Qingfeng, you're so vicious. Mo Zishan cursed. Slap. Mo Qingfeng gave her a hard slap and looked at her fiercely. You don't have the right to call me vicious. I'm just giving you a taste of your own medicine. Third madam, what surprise do you have for me? At this time, a man's voice came from outside, and there were hurried footsteps. Young Master O, since it's a surprise, then I can't tell you. You'll know when you go in. It was Zhao Minjing's voice. Mo Qingfeng smiled coldly and patted Mo Zishan's face gently. Your surprise is here. Enjoy your man. Mo Zishan was so angry that her face turned red. Her angry eyes stared at Mo Qingfeng as if she wanted to eat her alive. Her lips twitched, but she couldn't say anything. When Oting came in and saw Mo Zishan's slim back, his eyes lit up. He loved beauties the most. Zhao Minjing whispered to the maid behind her and then closed the door. She turned around and smiled at Oting. Young Master O, is it a surprise? You can have fun here tonight. That's right, we can really have fun tonight. Mo Qingfeng's cold voice floated in the room. Zhao Minjing trembled and looked at Mo Qingfeng, who walked out in front of Mo Zishan in shock. The original owner had been bullied since she was young, so her body wasn't developed very well. She was petite and half a head shorter than the tall Mo Zishan. Her body was also much thinner and smaller than Mo Zishan. Mo Zishan was wearing a luxurious dress today, so Mo Zishan's body completely blocked Mo Qingfeng's view. O Yuding and Zhao Minjing didn't even notice her when they came in. When she suddenly walked out, they were all shocked. O Yuding was frightened by her ugly face, and Zhao Minjing didn't expect Mo Qingfeng to be standing there as if nothing had happened. Mo Qingfeng, how did you? Zhao Minjing's voice trembled as she asked. Mo Qingfeng was surrounded by an indifferent and cold aura. Zhao Minjing immediately felt that she was surrounded by a gloomy and cold aura. Even breathing was difficult. Very disappointed. Mo Qingfeng came in front of them and looked coldly at Zhao Minjing. You're her. O Ting reacted. The woman who wore a veil to confuse him was her. He couldn't forget this pair of cold and charming eyes. Mo Qingfeng indifferently looked at him with disdain. She quickly reached out and pressed their acupuncture points. Under their shocked gazes, she fed them the pill she refined. Mo Qingfeng, you fed us poison. Zhao Minjing's face was pale as fear appeared in her eyes. She suddenly thought of Yi Qingyun's death. Would this vicious woman kill her like she did Yi Qingyun? Chapter 1490. After O Yuding fainted, Mo Qingfeng quickly stuffed him under the bed. She glanced coldly at Mo Zishan and Zhao Minjing. The aphrodisiac she made was especially strong and took effect very quickly. Now, their eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist, their cheeks were red, and their breathing was rapid. She smiled coldly. The aphrodisiac is taking effect. Chu Mukin will soon enjoy the good show you arranged. Wait for me here obediently, I will arrange a good man for you. Mo Qingfeng opened their acupoints and the aphrodisiac took effect. They couldn't control themselves at all and their wills became weak. At this moment, they felt very uncomfortable and longed for a man to hug them. Mo Qingfeng quickly carried a man back. This man was a kitchen worker. The previous Mo Qingfeng went to the kitchen to look for food. If he didn't deliberately make things difficult for her, Yi Qingyun and Zhao Minjing wouldn't have bumped into her and she wouldn't have been beaten to death. This man also took Mo Qingfeng's aphrodisiac. The aphrodisiac took effect faster than Zhao Minjing's. The moment Mo Qingfeng threw him in, he immediately pounced on Yi Qingyun. Under the aphrodisiac, Yi Qingyun, who was in unbearable pain, immediately tore the man's clothes with her hands like claws. Mo Qingfeng was very satisfied with this scene. She smiled coldly and a trace of coldness flashed past her eyes. She left the room and closed the door. At this moment, a group of messy footsteps came from the corridor. They were hurrying over. Mo Qingfeng's eyes darkened and glanced at the end of the corridor. Then, she jumped and flew up to the roof like a swallow. Sitting on the roof, she could hear the discordant sounds coming from the room. Did you really see the princess consort bring a man into her room? If you dare to lie, I won't forgive you. Chu Mukin's cold voice sounded, his cold eyes filled with malice and sternness. Your Highness, yes, yes. This servant saw with my own eyes that Princess Consort and a tall man were walking in this direction. Princess Consort even had her arms around the man's waist. Zhao Minjing's maidservant said respectfully with a hint of fear in her tone. On the roof, Mo Qingfeng smiled coldly. She remembered this servant girl. Living such a life here was simply too fun. If she had a cell phone, she really wanted to video call Maupassant and Huang Ling immediately and let them see how well she was doing here. Chu Mui had just walked to the door of Mo Qingfeng's room when she heard a series of screams coming from inside the room. There was even the sound of paw paw paw. When everyone present heard this strange sound, they understood what was going on inside. There were not many people who came. Chu Mukin and his two trusted aides, Du Wenjun and Bai Shuling, Zhao Minjing and Mo Zishan's maids, and Chu Mukin's two royal brothers. A man and a woman were locked in a room, and such sounds were coming out. It was obvious what was going on inside. Chu Mukin's cold face had become very ugly, and his whole body exuded a strong murderous aura. No matter how much he hated Mo Qingfeng, she was still the princess of the 8th Lord's mansion. How dare she have an affair with a man behind his back? He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. His face was twitching and his fists were clenched tightly. The two imperial brothers standing behind him, however, revealed a look of schadenfreude and anticipation. With such loud cries, it must be very intense, right? Bang! Chu Mukin kicked the door open and rushed in. The rest of the people followed. Zhao Minjing and Mo Zishan's maids looked at each other, and a smug smile flashed in their eyes. Mo Qingfeng, that ugly freak, is dead. A woman with a ruined reputation, let's see how she can survive in Chu Qiangua in the future. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were all stunned, especially Zhao Minjing and Mo Zishan's maidservants. When they saw the scene inside, their faces suddenly turned pale, and they looked at the two naked bodies in shock. The two women were riding on the bodies of the men, As for the arrival of Chu Mukin and the others, the 3 people on the ground who were enjoying themselves did not know. Moss. Moss. Madam. Miss. Miss. The 2 maids' legs began to tremble. They never dreamed that things would turn out like this. They wanted to go forward and pull their master away, but when they saw Chu Mukin's gloomy face, they could only stand there and tremble. Xue Ling. Pull them away. Chu Mukin roared in anger. This roar seemed to be able to collapse the room. Yes. Yes. Bai Shuling replied coldly. She was just wiping away Mo Qingfeng's cold sweat. When she heard the sounds from outside the room, her heart trembled. How could Mo Qingfeng be such a woman? How could she do such a thing? When she saw that it was Mo Zishan and Zhao Minjing, she secretly let out a sigh of relief. She quickly went forward and pulled Mo Zishan, who was about to reach her climax, and Zhao Minjing, who was licking the man's retreat. They had completely lost their minds. They only felt that their bodies were empty and needed something to fill that emptiness. When she was pulled away, Mo Zishan felt a sense of loss as if she had fallen from heaven to hell. She actually laid on the ground and cried. When Zhao Minjing saw Chu Mukin, she pounced forward like a hungry wolf seeing a delicious meal. Before she could touch Chu Mukin, she was sent flying by Chu Mukin. Mo Qingfeng, who was on the roof, couldn't help but laugh. What a wonderful show! How satisfying! Mo Qingfeng was very glad that it was her. If it was the original owner, she would have been killed by them. Suddenly, she felt a chill behind her. A gloomy coldness enveloped her. Mo Qing's eyes turned cold. She turned around abruptly and was shocked. It was a man. A man who was like a ghost. Mo Qingfeng was shocked. Then, she quickly stood up and looked at him calmly. He had a handsome face and a pair of cold and deep eyes. His eyes emitted a soul-shaking coldness. His whole body emitted the aura of a war god. His black clothes made him even more noble and mysterious. His tall body stood upright on the back of a huge bat. He was like a god looking at Mo Qingfeng deeply and coldly. His cold aura had already covered Mo Qingfeng's innate domineering and arrogant aura. Mo Qingfeng's heart trembled. De Gezinen. Mo Qingfeng's expression changed slightly. She thought to herself, did he come to take her back? She only found out later that her nails were poisonous. When they fought that night, she cut his neck. The poison should have seeped into his body. He was actually fine. Thinking of the poison, Mo Qingfeng's gaze couldn't help but move to De Gezinen's neck. There was still a scratch there. De Gezinen seemed to be able to see through what she was thinking. He reached out and touched the scar. His lips curved and a faint smile appeared on his cold face. In that instant, it was as if thousands of flowers bloomed at the same time. It was stunning. Mo Qingfeng's eyes darkened. She looked up at him indifferently. De Gezinen, when are you going to stop pestering me? She thought for a bit and asked, last time when I went back to the Missouri estate, were you also secretly following me? Also, you said you would take me back. Where? Did this man know something that could send her back to the 21st century? But her sixth sense told her that it shouldn't be. Leave the 8th king's estate and come back to Duge Castle with me. De Gezinen looked at her ugly and cold face. His deep eyes flashed with brilliance as he slowly opened his mouth to speak. Duge Castle. Mo Qingfeng repeated the name in her heart. Where was this? The original owner's memories didn't have any impression of Duge Castle. Sure enough, it wasn't the 21st century. It was his castle. Sure. Mo Qingfeng put a finger to her lips and shushed him. Then she pointed below and lowered her voice. Don't make a sound. Watch this play. She didn't plan to stay in the 8th King's estate, but she also didn't plan to leave so soon. The man in front of her kept pestering her, wanting her to go back with him. She had thought about finding a place to stay after leaving the 8th King's estate. Now that this man appeared and said he wanted to take her back, she would go with him and see if Dugge Castle was as big as she imagined. Of course, the play wasn't over yet. She wouldn't leave so soon. Play. Dugge Zinin raised his eyebrows. You like to watch this kind of play? He came to the cold water pavilion before she went to the roof. How could he not know what happened in the room? He had been secretly observing her for a long time. Her expression as she sat here and enjoyed the scene below was really annoying. Mo Qingfeng sat down and waved to him behind her. If you don't like to watch, you can leave first. After I finish everything, I will naturally go with you. Give me half a month or a month. It wasn't bad to go out and see the world. Perhaps she could find a way to go back herself. Or perhaps this Dugge Zinin could help her. Dugge Zinin's eyes flashed. Really? Would she leave with him so easily? Really? Don't make a sound. It won't be good if the people below hear it. If Chu Mukin knew that she framed Mo Zishan and Zhao Minjing, the nature would be different. Du Wenjun, put the man in prison. Inside the room, Chu Mukin roared. He was furious and his eyes were red. Bai Shuling, put Zhao Minjing in the woodshed and wait for her punishment. Throw Mo Zishan back to the Missouri estate. After roaring, Chu Mukin flung his sleeves and left angrily. It was fine if it was Mo Zishan, but it had to be Zhao Minjing, his concubine. If this kind of thing spread, how could the 8th King's estate face others? In the main hall, the banquet continued. Chu Mukin walked in with a cold and handsome face. Just a moment ago, he went out of the 8th King's estate and came back with a black face. Everyone was confused, but no one asked much. They all knew that the 8th King was indifferent and unpredictable. If they could avoid provoking him, they would try their best not to provoke him. Chu Muchen coldly glanced at Mo Qingfeng's position, only to see the veiled woman leaning against the chair, drinking cup after cup, not noticing his appearance at all. Chu Muchen walked over and stood in front of her. He looked at her gloomily like an Azura. That gloomy face and those burning eyes seemed to want to kill Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng felt that burning gaze. She raised her head and coldly glanced at him with drunken eyes and continued to drink. Humph. Chu Mukin snorted and walked to the main seat. Then, he coldly glanced at Mo Fei who was talking and laughing with other ministers. Chapter 1491. Mo Qingfeng also glanced at Mo Fei thoughtfully. Her face under the veil showed a sneer. Gao Darren, what's wrong with you? Gao Darren. Quick. Call the imperial doctor. Suddenly, there was an uproar outside the hall. The imperial censor came back from the toilet and fainted at the door of the hall. Chu Mukin's face changed greatly. He got up and flew out of the hall. In the corridor outside the hall, a group of people surrounded Gao Darren. What's going on? Chu Mukin asked coldly. Today was his birthday banquet. Why did so many things happen? 8th Wangya, Gao Darren suddenly fainted and foamed at the mouth. Li Darren, who was close to Gao Darren, said anxiously. Chu Mukin squatted down and picked up Gao Darren's wrist to check his pulse. His face was very heavy. Imperial Dr. Liang. This humble official is here. Imperial Dr. Liang rushed out of the crowd and responded. Quickly treat him. Chu Mukin got up and ordered sternly. His handsome face made people feel that if he can't cure Gao Darren, Imperial Dr. Liang won't live. Yes, yes. Imperial Dr. Liang replied with a trembling voice. When he saw Chu Mukin's cold and gloomy eyes, his forehead suddenly broke out in cold sweat. Today, in addition to Imperial Dr. Liang, there were also two Imperial Doctors, Imperial Dr. Fu, who came to Chu Mukin's birthday banquet. When Gao Darren fainted, Imperial Dr. Liang didn't want to come out to treat him. Imperial Dr. Fu also had the same mentality. Anyone who knows Gao Darren knows that he suffers from a strange disease. The Imperial doctors in the court can't do anything about his disease. Even the famous doctor, who was called a divine doctor by the people, can't cure his disease. After Imperial Dr. Liang checked Gao Darren's pulse, his face turned blue and white. Gao Darren's pulse was very messy. He looked like a dead person when he fainted. His pulse was so messy. With his many years of experience in medicine, Gao Darren, who had been ill for many years, practiced martial arts. There was a chaotic energy in his body that hurt his qi. It was like a monster was devouring his qi in his body. Once a person's qi is gone, his life will end. Moreover, there was a poisonous gas in his body. The reason why he fainted was related to this poisonous gas. Imperial Dr. Liang timidly told Chu Mukin what he knew. After listening, Chu Mukin's face became even more ugly. There was poison in his body. Where did this poisonous gas come from? Chu Mukin asked coldly. The ugly face flashed in front of his eyes, and the hands in his sleeves clenched tightly. This damned woman. Answering back Wang Ye, it seems like food poisoning. Imperial Dr. Liang said, as beads of sweat flowed down from his forehead. Food poisoning. Chu Mukin's cold face became even more ghastly. Wang Ye. Gao Darren is deeply poisoned. His pulse is very chaotic. The terrible poison has attacked his heart. He can't be cured. Imperial Dr. Liang's voice trembled even more. When Mo Qingfeng heard this, he intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Censor Gao's seat. The food on his table was almost finished, and there were only a few lotus flowers left. After this commotion, everyone in the hall had left. She was the only one who was leisurely drinking wine. After drinking a glass of wine, Mo Qingfeng poured another glass. When she was drinking, her eyes swept and her eyebrows slightly frowned. She had an impression of Censor Gao in her predecessor's memory. He was the cousin of the Empress Dowager. He once found many doctors for her predecessor to treat her face. Mo Qingfeng saw that everyone's attention was on Censor Gao and didn't pay attention to her. With a thought, she quickly entered the 9 Dragon Balls space and came out quickly. It only took her a blink of an eye to come out. The wine cup in her hand was not filled with water, but with spirit spring water. She slowly walked over and said to them in a soft voice, "Make way. Perhaps I can save him." When the crowd heard this, they all made way for her and looked at her curiously. The veil covered her ugly face, and at this time, she revealed a pair of clear and bright beautiful eyes. Other than the people of the 8th Prince's palace and Mo Fei who knew that she was the ugly girl Mo Qingfeng, no one knew who this delicate and pretty girl was. Seeing her full forehead and beautiful appearance, they were all attracted by her beauty. "What are you going to do?" Just as she was about to squat down to check Censor Gao's body, Chu Mukin suddenly stretched out his arm and stopped her in front of her chest. Mo Qingfeng smiled, her beautiful eyes smiling. She glanced at his arm and then looked up at him directly. "Didn't I just say? Maybe I can save Lord Gao." "Wang Ye, what do you think I'm going to do?" Chu Mukin scornfully looked at the wine glass in her hand. His cold voice had a hint of sarcasm. "I think you want to kill him, right? I have no grudges with Lord Gao. Why would I want to kill him?" Mo Qingfeng said with a smile. His voice was extremely pleasant to the ear, like the cool breeze in spring. Everyone started to guess who this peerless beauty with a voice that was as pleasant as a zither was. 8th Wangya didn't know how to be gentle with girls. How could he wrong a girl's good intentions? Chu Mukin pursed his thin lips and was choked by her words. She was right. She had no grudges with Lord Gao. Why would she want to kill him? Lord Gao once helped me. Now I can't just watch him die. Wangya, whether I want to kill Lord Gao or not, won't you know if you take back your arm? Mo Qingfeng raised her voice slightly, as if she was hinting at something or warning something. I, Mo Qingfeng, have always been disciplined. If others don't offend me, I won't take the initiative to offend others. If others offend me, I'll pay them back double. Mo Qingfeng. She was the 8th Wangfei, Mo Qingfeng. Everyone was stunned. This beautiful girl in front of them was the famous Mo Qingfeng of Chu Qiangua. What surprised them even more was that she dared to look at Chu Mukin. She wasn't as cowardly as the rumors said. Recently, there were rumors in the capital that she wasn't cowardly. She could even kill more than 20 of Yi Zhong's subordinates in a very short time. Was it true? They were surprised, but they didn't dare to say anything. The atmosphere was very heavy. Lord Gao was still lying on the ground. Chu Mukin's face was dark. Who dared to say anything? Who dared to talk about Mo Qingfeng? Chu Mukin retracted his arm. Mo Qingfeng squatted beside Lord Gao, checked his pulse, and tested his breath. Then, she frowned slightly. Her movements of checking his pulse and checking his breath were elegant and skillful. Only people who often treat people could be so skillful. Her slightly frowning expression was seen by Imperial Dr. Liang. Imperial Dr. Liang raised his arm and gently wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. He looked at Mo Qingfeng intently. As the most skilled imperial doctor in the court, he was helpless to treat Imperial Censor Gao's illness. How can she, a young lady, treat him? After checking his body, Mo Qingfeng took out a small white medicine bottle from her waist and handed it to Chu Mukin. Chu Mukin looked coldly at the medicine bottle handed over and said unhappily, Ben Wang is not sick. Chapter 1492. I know you're not sick. Help me open the bottle cap and pour out a pill for me. Mo Qingfeng said indifferently. The medicine bottle was brought out from her space. It was a modern design. The cap had to be opened, unlike the ancient medicine bottle that could be opened with a bite. This kind of medicine bottle was designed to be compact and didn't allow wind to enter. Once the pill was stored inside, it wouldn't deteriorate even if it was stored for 1,000 years. The effect wouldn't expire. Chu Mukin's eyes were deep. He felt slightly embarrassed. Damn woman, she actually ordered him to do something in front of everyone. Everyone broke out in cold sweat for Mo Qingfeng. They looked at Chu Mukin's gloomy face and Mo Qingfeng's malicious eyes. They all thought that he would slap the bottle away. They didn't expect. Chu Mukin took the bottle and looked at it. He unscrewed the cap and calmly poured a pill into Mo Qingfeng's palm. As he poured the pills, everyone could see Mo Qingfeng's slender fingers, fair skin, and 2 earthworm-like scars on his palms. Chu Mukin frowned when he saw the scars. After putting the pill into Imperial Censor Gao's mouth, Mo Qingfeng fed him the spirit spring water in the cup. Her slender fingers gently touched his throat. Imperial Censor Gao's Adam's apple moved up and down. The pill and the spirit spring water were swallowed by him. The people standing on the side were shocked by her action. Did the legendary 7th young lady of the Mo family know how to cultivate? Wasn't she a waste? Her action just now was so light that it was almost invisible. Ordinary people might not be able to perceive it, but it couldn't escape the eyes of cultivators. In the Rosen continent, where martial arts were respected, most of the court officials were martial artists. The white light emitted from Mo Qingfeng's fingertips could be seen by most people, including Mo Fei. As a father, Mo Fei saw his daughter's ability. He didn't feel happy or proud because of his daughter's ability. When he thought of his wife's destruction and how Mo Qingfeng wasn't like this before, his face became very ugly. His fierce eyes looked like he wanted to kill Mo Qingfeng. Before long, Imperial Censor Gao, who had taken the pill, woke up. He opened his eyes and saw so many people watching him. He was stunned and puzzled. "Get up and walk," Mo Qingfeng said. Censor Gao looked at her and asked blankly, "Who are you?" When he glanced at Chu Mukin who was standing behind her, he turned pale with fright. He quickly got up and kowtowed to him, "I deserve to die. I deserve to die 10,000 deaths. What crime have you committed?" Chu Mukin asked coldly. Then, he said to a guard beside him, "Arrest all the people who are in charge of today's meal. I want to interrogate them one by one." "Yes." The guard was about to leave when Mo Qingfeng suddenly stopped him. "No need to call anyone." "What do you mean? Could it be that you know who poisoned official Gao?" Chu Mujian looked at her coldly. Censor Gao's body trembled and he broke out in a cold sweat. Someone had poisoned him. Someone wanted him dead. Imperial Censor Gao is suffering from food poisoning. Imperial Dr. Liang is right about this, but his poison was not given to him by others. Mo Qingfeng said faintly, "He has epilepsy. Recently, he has been practicing martial arts too much, which made the brain and central nervous system dysfunctional. His pulse is chaotic. He just ate a lot of peanuts and cucumber slices. Peanuts and cucumbers are incompatible. Taking both will hurt his vitality. Official Gao has been ill for a long time. His vitality has been damaged. If he eats food that is incompatible with him, his vitality will be damaged even more, so he fainted. A person's vitality is greatly damaged and he has been sick for a long time. Plus, food is incompatible with him. He is lucky that he didn't die immediately." Censor Gao was sweating profusely. He suddenly felt cold inside his body. His limbs trembled and his face became paler. As an imperial physician, Liang Fu secretly praised her medical skills. With just a pill and a cup of water, she was able to wake up official Gao, who was hovering on the brink of death. She was simply a miracle worker. Chu Mukin looked at Mo Qingfeng indifferently and expressionlessly. His indifferent eyes flashed with surprise, and then he looked at Mo Qifei. Mo Qifei was also surprised. How did Mo Qingfeng know how to treat people? He was also surprised. "You will be fine for the time being. Stand up and walk. Don't practice martial arts again in the future. It will kill you." Mo Qingfeng looked down at Censor Gao and said faintly. "Mo Qingfeng, how can Ben Wang believe what you just said?" Ben Wang also ate peanuts, cucumber. He glanced at everyone present coldly. They must have eaten it too. Why didn't they get food poisoning? Hee hee. When Mo Qingfeng heard this, she couldn't help but chuckle twice. Then, she looked at Chu Mukin and said, "Wang Ye, do you suffer from epilepsy or other diseases? Is your vitality damaged? You just ate peanuts and cucumber, but did you eat a lot?" Chu Mukin choked for a while. His handsome face became more gloomy. After everyone heard this, a few people almost burst into laughter, but when they saw Chu Mukin's ugly face, they held back. This eighth Wang Fei was getting more and more interesting. After Censor Gao walked a few steps, he felt that the stuffiness in his chest suddenly dissipated. In the past, there was always a stuffiness in his chest, and it was very uncomfortable. Especially when he was sleeping on the bed, it felt like there was a big stone pressing down on his chest, and it was very difficult to breathe. Now, he didn't feel that stuffiness anymore. Censor Gao came in front of Mo Qingfeng and said excitedly, 8th Wang Fei, the stuffiness in my chest is gone, and my breathing is completely smooth. 8th Wang Fei, I really don't know how to thank you. You are a living Buddha. When everyone heard this, their eyes lit up when they looked at Mo Qingfeng. Even the godly doctor couldn't treat Censor Gao, but the 8th Wang Fei could. She was the real godly doctor. Mo Qingfeng glanced at him. Pay attention to your diet in the future. Don't overeat. You can't practice martial arts anymore. It's not good for your body. Yes, Your Majesty. Censor Gao replied. His voice was much louder than before. Censor Gao was fine, and the food wasn't poisoned. The banquet ended like this. Everyone bid farewell to Chu Mukin, and the last one to leave was Mo Fei. Recently, he felt that his body wasn't well. His dantian seemed to be sealed, and he couldn't use his martial arts. Moreover, when he used his martial arts, his heart would hurt. He would cough in the middle of the night, and in the last few nights, he even coughed up blood. His face was getting more and more haggard and old day by day. He found a doctor, and they prescribed him medicine, but he didn't get better at all. Instead, his condition got worse. Now that he saw Mo Qingfeng easily wake Censor Gao up, he wanted Mo Qingfeng to treat him. But when he thought of how he treated her in the past, he felt guilty and couldn't say it. In the end, he thickened his face and gathered great courage to say, Daughter, father has been feeling unwell recently. Can you treat father? Mo Qingfeng sneered. Her eyes were cold. She glanced at Mo Fei, got up, and was about to leave. Mo Qingfeng, didn't you hear Marquis Mo's words? Chu Mukin looked at her back coldly. She didn't even care about her own father. How could this woman be so cold-blooded? Mo Qingfeng turned around. Everyone had left, leaving only those who couldn't be more familiar with her. She didn't need to hide anything. She gently took off her veil and looked coldly at Mo Fei. Was Marquis Mo talking to me just now? Facing her ugly face, Mo Fei couldn't bear to look at it. But he had a favor to ask of her. No matter how ugly her face was, he had to face it. Qingfeng, father has been feeling unwell recently. Can you take a look at father? Mo Fei looked at Mo Qingfeng and said flatteringly. Then he pulled up his sleeves and stretched out his hand, waiting for Mo Qingfeng to take his pulse. Father. Mo Qingfeng's eyes flashed with disdain. She sneered, Are you my father? Other than Maupassant, who was qualified to be her father? Chu Mukin frowned and looked coldly at this cold-blooded woman. Even he could feel that Mo Fei's spirit wasn't good. As a daughter, couldn't she care about her father? Mo Fei's expression changed. He gritted his teeth. He had already put down his pride and begged her. She mocked him like this. Anyone would be afraid in the face of death. Especially someone like Mo Fei who was greedy for life and craved for wealth and glory. He was even more afraid of death. In order to cure this strange disease, he could only suppress the anger in his heart. He looked apologetically at Mo Qingfeng. It was father's fault before. Father will love you well in the future. Qingfeng, can you bear to see father being tortured by this disease? Aren't you sad to see me like this? Mo Qingfeng looked at him with a faint smile. Can you not call me father in front of me? I get goosebumps when I hear it. It's you who is being tortured by this disease, not me. Why should I be sad? You. Mo Fei, who had been in the imperial court for many years, was so angry that he almost hit Mo Qingfeng. But just as he was angry, his heart began to hurt again. He quickly calmed down. He had to endure it. He wanted her to treat him. So that anger was suppressed by him. Qing Feng, forgive father, okay? It was all father's fault. I shouldn't have treated you like this. But no matter what, I am still your biological father. Enough, this girl doesn't have time to listen to your confession. Mo Qing Feng walked in front of Mo Fei and sneered. She stretched out her hand. Do you see? Do you know how my hand got this wound? I have many scars like this on my body. If I wasn't lucky, I don't know how many times I would have died in the hands of Mo Zishan. If it wasn't for your indulgence of them and indifference to me, would I be where I am today? The Empress Dowager just left and you want to cut off your relationship with me. Now you say I am father. Don't you think it's ironic? These were the memories left by the original owner. Mo Qing Feng remembered it very clearly. Although she didn't personally experience such cruel treatment by her family, she felt pity for her when she thought of how the original owner grew up in such an environment. Qing Feng. Mo Fei's old face was embarrassed. His fawning expression had a hint of begging. God knows he had the urge to strangle her. I won't treat you. Don't blame me for being cruel. Mo Qing Feng said coldly. She looked at Chu Muqin with disdain and walked away with lotus steps. Chapter 1493. Mo Qing Feng. You unfilial daughter, you will be struck by lightning for treating your father like this. Mo Fei couldn't suppress the anger in his stomach. He glared at Mo Qingfeng's figure and roared. Because he was too angry, his heart hurt and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Chu Muqin raised his eyebrows and looked at him coldly. He didn't go forward to greet him. Mo Qingfeng's eyes were cold. It was her freedom to treat people or not. If she could be struck by lightning like this, how many people in this world would be struck by lightning? So comfortable, so good. At this time, Bai Shuling walked over with Mo Zishan who was still immersed in the ambiguous world. The reason why she only brought her over now was because Chu Muqin considered Mo Zishan's reputation and asked her to hand her over after the banquet. Mo Qing Feng stopped and looked at Mo Zishan who was on Bai Shuling's shoulder. She frowned slightly. Still not awake. She raised her chin slightly and was a little proud. She didn't expect the village medicine she developed could last for so long. Mo Fei initially thought it was the people from the 8th Marquis' palace causing trouble. Seeing Chu Muqin's face getting darker and darker, his anger towards Mo Qing Feng was instantly thrown to the back of his mind. He was inexplicably proud and looked at Bai Shuling who was walking over with Schadenfreude. Bai Shuling came in front of him and put Mo Zishan who looked like a crazy woman in front of him. He was stunned. When he saw the woman with disheveled clothes and messy hair with purple marks on her exposed skin, his face suddenly changed. His heart hurt, his throat was blocked and he spat out a mouthful of blood. This. He clutched his chest in pain and looked in disbelief at Mo Zishan who was lying on the ground and touching his body with both hands. She still had a look of unsatisfied and craving. Then he looked at Chu Muqin in horror. Chu Muqin coldly said, "She drank and hooked up with my men. Marquis Mo, bring her back as soon as possible. Don't embarrass yourself in front of me." What sin? Mo Fei was so agitated and angry that he fainted on the spot. Chu Muqin asked Bai Shuling to send them away. He didn't want to talk about this kind of shameful thing. He didn't want to look at this kind of woman. After they left, Chu Muqin glanced coldly at Mo Qing Feng who was watching the show from the side. Seeing Mo Zishan's reputation being ruined, and Mo Fei vomiting blood and fainting, her mood was incomparably good. She stuck out her tongue at him and shrugged her shoulders mischievously. Chu Muqin's mind shook, and his mood became even more irritable. Mo Qingfeng, have you caused enough trouble? Ever since this woman came to the manor, there had not been a day of peace in the manor. No, it should be said that ever since she was beaten awake by Yi Qingyun and the others, there had not been a day of peace in the manor. Everything had been stirred up by this woman. When did you see me making a scene? Am I not standing here quietly? Mo Qingfeng looked at Chu Mukin innocently. Everything that happened today was arranged by you. His tone was very certain. He didn't ask her at all, but he was sure that she was the one who asked. If you think so, then so be it. As she spoke, she tucked the hair hanging down by her ears. Her appearance was a little casual and a little lazy. If it wasn't for her ugly face, she would look like a coquettish little fox. She was extremely enchanting. Chu Mukin pursed his thin lips and looked at Mo Qingfeng darkly. Who exactly are you? Why did you possess Mo Qingfeng? Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng replied coldly, but she was very surprised in her heart. Did she show off too much and make this man suspicious? Possessed? Then she thought about it and sneered. She wasn't a demon, nor was she a ghost. What possessed? Her soul had only transmigrated into Mo Qingfeng's body, and she was indeed Mo Qingfeng now. You don't plan to tell me the truth? Chu Mukin narrowed his eyes dangerously. His voice was as cold as a sharp knife. He wanted to use this knife to end her life. Mo Qingfeng thought of Yuting under the bed in Coldwater Pavilion. Plus, she didn't want to face Chu Mukin. She sneered and looked at Chu Mukin coldly. I am Mo Qingfeng. Chu Mukin, whether you believe it or not, I am the Mo Estate 7th Miss, Mo Qingfeng. With that, she turned and strode away. Damn it, she was weak and timid. When she was bullied, why didn't he ask who she was? Back at Coldwater Pavilion, Mo Qingfeng sat on the couch and patted the edge of the bed with both hands. Is it comfortable lying under there? Yuting under the bed heard this and rolled his eyes in disdain. He was already awake before Chu Mukin came in. The three naked bodies were flirting on the floor. He also appreciated it. He also understood why Mo Qingfeng stuffed him under the bed. If it wasn't for her, he would be the one who was plotted against, and the man who was locked in the prison would be him. If you don't crawl out, I'll let you lie there for the rest of your life. Mo Qingfeng's patience was limited. She didn't believe that Yuting wasn't awake yet. She only gave him an ordinary ecstasy pill, and he would wake up in a moment. If he felt comfortable lying under the bed, she didn't mind fulfilling his wish. I want to go out too. You have to unseal my acupuncture point. She had already sealed his acupuncture point. He couldn't move, so how could he crawl out? Yuting felt extremely sullen. He had lived for so long, but he had never encountered such a sullen thing. Mo Qingfeng was slightly startled, and couldn't help but laugh. She jumped off the bed, reached out and pulled Yuting out, then unsealed his acupuncture point. I thought you were sleeping too comfortably and didn't want to come out. Mo Qingfeng smiled. She didn't hate harmless people. Yuting, who was lying on the ground, stared at her with his black eyes. He slowly stretched his limbs, then slowly sat up, tidied his robe, and tidied his messy hair. Mo Qingfeng came to the table and sat down. She poured 2 cups of tea. Yuting looked at her. She gave him a look, meaning for him to sit down and drink tea with her. Yuting remembered that she had just thrown a pill into the teapot. His handsome face darkened, and he said angrily, the tea is poisonous. I'm not drinking it. Who knew what kind of poison she would give him? This woman was just like her face. She was extremely ugly and vicious. When he thought of those 3 people, he still had lingering fear. Mo Qingfeng only smiled faintly. She picked up her cup and slowly tasted it. After a few sips, she looked up at Guiding with a smile that was not a smile. Is there someone who is stupid enough to drink poison tea? I don't like drinking tea. Yuding retorted. Is that so? Mo Qingfeng looked at him. The faint smile in her eyes seemed to be able to see through him. Yuding felt uncomfortable under her gaze. If a beauty looked at him like this, he wouldn't be able to resist pouncing on her. But Mo Qingfeng wasn't a beauty. She was an ugly woman, and a poisonous one at that. It was better for him to stay away from this kind of woman. Chapter 1494. The candlelight on the table flickered, making her face even uglier. Guiding looked out the window. It was already dark. He walked to Mo Qingfeng and said coldly, I'm going back. Then, he walked to the door. Mo Qingfeng shook the cup in her hand and said faintly, You're not even going to say thank you. Guiding paused and then sneered, Thank you. You made me lie under the bed for so long, and I still have to say thank you. Do you really think I'm stupid? If it wasn't for me, the adulterer would be you. Think about it, if Chu Mukin saw you sleeping with his concubine, would he let you go? Mo Qingfeng looked at him with a faint smile. That smile was like a deadly poppy. Guiding's heart turned cold. He looked at her coldly. She seemed to be right. Do you feel disgusted when you see my ugly face? Guiding's eyes fell on her face. It was ugly, but not disgusting. But for people who like to look beautiful, she was really ugly. Especially for a playboy like Guiding who only looked at beautiful women. He didn't care about women like Mo Qingfeng. Guiding pursed his lips. She was ugly, but he had to admit that her arrogance and the coldness in her eyes couldn't be ignored. What do you want? Guiding frowned. He admitted that this ugly woman was very smart. If she wasn't smart, today's adulterer would be him and her. He didn't know her. She didn't need to help him at all. But when she was secretly replacing him, she found the chef. Such a smart woman wouldn't help anyone unconditionally. I want something from you. Mo Qingfeng opened her mouth. Her voice was very pleasant. Guiding raised his eyebrows. She had a purpose. He walked to Mo Qingfeng and sat down. His bright eyes looked at her lustfully. Eighth princess consort, what do you want from me? Is it? Then, he glanced down and said proudly, this young master's thing is very valuable. But if eighth princess consort wants it, I can consider it. Mo Qingfeng sneered, cut it off. Guiding heard and shouted, no. If you want to be happy, this young master can satisfy you. If you cut it off, this young master won't live anymore. I want your dragon-taming spiritual pearl. Mo Qing said calmly. When Yuding heard this, he was shocked and almost fell off his chair. He looked at Mo Qingfeng in shock, dragon-taming spiritual pearl. What are you doing here? Of course. No. Yuding refused immediately. He didn't have the instinct to take the dragon-taming spiritual pearl. Even if he did, he wouldn't give it to this ugly woman. Mo Qingfeng looked at him with a faint smile, exuding a dangerous aura. Seeing her like this, Guiding took a deep breath and said in frustration, the dragon-taming spiritual pearl is just a legend. I haven't seen it since my great-grandfather's generation. I don't know where it is. How can I give it to you? I don't care what method you use. I'll give you 7 days. After 7 days, I want the dragon-taming spiritual pearl. Mo Qingfeng said coldly. He narrowed his eyes and said threateningly, you can choose not to hand it over, but I can't guarantee that you won't be able to survive. Ugly woman, are you threatening me? Oh Yuding jumped up from his chair and glared at Mo Qingfeng. He was the young master of the O family, and he was being threatened by an ugly woman. Since when did he live such a coward? Mo Qingfeng shrugged her shoulders indifferently. Whether it's a threat or not, you'll know in 7 days. You can leave now. Ugly woman, this young master grew up being scared. The O family isn't that easy to bully. O Yuding's face was red with anger. He pointed at Mo Qingfeng and shouted angrily. After drinking, he waved his sleeves and left. Mo Qingfeng frowned. He was shouting so loudly that her eardrums hurt. She was a little dizzy, and she drank too much just now. After O Yuding left, she suddenly felt sleepy. She was about to enter the space when she suddenly smelled a faint fragrance from outside the door. Her eyes turned cold. She saw Bai Shuling standing at the door looking at her in surprise. Mo Qingfeng looked at her coldly. Chu Mukin really cares about me. He sent you to monitor me again. Princess, why is young Master O here? Bai Shuling asked in confusion. And he left angrily. Mo Qingfeng's eyes were cold. Is this something you should ask? As a servant, you have to be alert. You have to know what to ask and what not to ask. Bai Shuling's expression changed slightly. She lowered her eyes and didn't say anything. Mo Qingfeng got up and yawned while stretching. I'm sleepy. Just guard the door and don't disturb my rest. She opened the screen and smiled sarcastically. How could he monitor her like this? With a thought, she disappeared into thin air and entered the space of the 9 Dragon Ball. Other than the few people who witnessed the scene at the Cold Water Pavilion, almost no one knew that a very interesting scene happened at the residence on Chu Mukin's birthday. After O Yuding returned from the 8th Lord's residence, he didn't mention a word about this. He was a smart person. If he didn't keep this a secret, he would die a horrible death. Would Chu Mukin let him go? Would Mo Qingfeng let him go? Thinking of Mo Qingfeng, his scalp went numb and his heart trembled. And that chef was naturally locked up in the prison until he starved to death. After hearing that Mo Zishan returned to the Mo residence and woke up, this was a serious blow to her. She actually went crazy. Old Master Mo's condition worsened. The imperial doctors in the palace were invited, but they all shook their heads and sighed that there was no cure. And Zhao Minjing was naturally divorced by Chu Mukin and then kicked out of the residence with nothing. Zhao Minjing knew that she was tricked by Mo Qingfeng. She knelt in front of Chu Mukin and begged, but Chu Mukin was indifferent and heartlessly kicked her out of the residence. Which man could stand a woman cheating on him? Carrying a burden, with reluctance, with unwillingness, with hatred towards Mo Qingfeng, Zhao Minjing walked out of the 8th Lord's residence in a mess. She, who cared about her face, didn't dare to walk out from the main door. Instead, she quietly left from the back door. In the quiet passage, Mo Qingfeng, who was dressed in purple, leaned against the wall. She was eating melon seeds while waiting for the green figure to slowly walk closer. She looked straight at the green figure in front of her with a smile. That's right, she specially came today to send her out of the residence. Mo Qingfeng. Seeing the person in front of her clearly, Zhao Minjing was shocked at first. Then she lost her mind and rushed forward like a crazy woman. Mo Qingfeng, you bitch, I'm going to kill you. Bang! Before she rushed up, Mo Qingfeng raised her right leg and kicked her to the ground. The only 2 hairpins in her hair fell to the ground. She felt a pain in her chest and spat out mouthfuls of blood. Kill me. What are you going to use to fight me? Mo Qingfeng looked down at Zhao Minjing condescendingly with a contemptuous smile on his face. Chapter 1495. Fight with me. What are you going to use to fight me? Mo Qingfeng looked down at Zhao Minjing condescendingly with a contemptuous smile on his face. Mo Qingfeng, you'll die a horrible death. You'll get retribution. Zhao Minjing turned her head. Her face was covered in blood. Her eyes were vicious as she cursed with hatred. She looked like a female ghost. Mo Qingfeng took 2 steps forward and stood beside Zhao Minjing. She looked down at her with contempt. I didn't do anything bad. What retribution? When you and Mo Zishan plotted against me, did you ever think that you'd get retribution? Look, this is your retribution for plotting against me. Right now, I'm just giving him a taste of his own medicine. Is that wrong as well? If I didn't do this, wouldn't I be the one being laughed at and chased out of the manor? You can only blame yourself for ending up like this. You should just stay in the 8th Marquis Manor and be the 3rd Madam. Why do you have to go against me? Do you want to know why you were divorced? It's not that Chu Mukin didn't favor you or that you weren't ruthless enough. It's just retribution. You being chased out of the manor today is your retribution. This stupid woman deserved to die. Mo Qingfeng didn't kill her when she was catching the ghost last time, which meant that she spared her life. But she was restless and kept thinking about how to scheme against Mo Qingfeng. Was Mo Qingfeng easy to bully? She once swore that if people didn't offend her, she wouldn't offend them. If people offended her, she would pay them back double. Mo Qingfeng stood there and her beautiful eyes became colder. Today, she was here to end Zhao Minjing's life. Such a stupid woman would only cause trouble in this world. If she didn't die today, she would definitely be a disaster in the future. You clearly drank that pot of wine. How can you be fine? Zhao Minjing suddenly felt the gloomy coldness coming from her body and couldn't help but shiver. She saw her drink that pot of wine cup after cup with her own eyes. How could she be fine? Now she regretted provoking Mo Qingfeng. If she didn't listen to Mo Zishan, she would still be the 3rd Madam of the 8th Marquis Manor. She would have people serving her. Why did he fight with Mo Qingfeng? Even though she was the princess consort, His Highness did not favor her. Yi Qingyun was dead and her life in the manor was better. Why did she have to provoke this demoness? Because I'm capable enough. Mo Qingfeng smiled, but there was no warmth in her beautiful eyes, and there was even a trace of contempt. You're not Mo Qingfeng. You're a monster. Zhao Minjing yelled at Mo Qingfeng after calming down. I'm Mo Qingfeng, the perfect Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng sneered. Zhao Minjing, are you regretting it now? You shouldn't have provoked me back then. Don't be too pleased with yourself. Zhao Minjing's voice was trembling. Thinking that she was going to leave the Fu, even if she was a demoness, she didn't need to be afraid of her anymore. She had to leave with a backbone. She glared at Mo Qingfeng with resentment and said loudly, You killed the 2nd Madam and forced me out of the Fu. Do you think that no woman in the Fu will fight with you? Mo Qingfeng, don't be too proud. His Highness has always been thinking about the princess of Tan Chuan country. His Highness will definitely marry her. She is the real princess. What does it have to do with me who becomes the princess? Let me tell you, I don't care about the identity of the 8th princess at all. Mo Qingfeng bent down, her eyes cold. She gently patted Zhao Minjing's face and said coldly, You've always wanted to be the princess, but unfortunately, you won't have the chance. Go down and be the concubine of the King of Hell. After saying this, her eyes became even more vicious. The index finger that was patting Zhao Minjing's face bent slightly. The sharp fingernail lightly scratched and a shallow wound appeared on Zhao Minjing's white and tender face. The wound was bleeding. Zhao Minjing didn't feel any pain, but her face was pale from fright from Mo Qingfeng's last words. Her body couldn't help but tremble. She looked at her in terror. Seeing her cold eyes, she trembled even more. Don't kill me, she didn't want to die. She wanted to live. Mo Qingfeng took back her hand and calmly looked at the index finger that scratched her face. Her fingernail pinched her skin. She gently flicked it and then gently blew it. Even with her ugly face, one could see that her movements were elegant and noble, with a bit of enchanting. Chu Mukin, who was standing on the wall, suddenly looked gloomy. He tightly pursed his thin lips and looked at the ugly woman in front of him. Mo Qingfeng got up, clapped her hands, twisted her slender waist, and walked away with lotus steps. Zhao Minjing's pale face flashed a touch of surprise. Didn't this demoness want to kill her? She left just like that. Suddenly, she recovered and found that she didn't lose her life. She immediately got up, picked up the bag on the ground, endured the pain from her chest, and stumbled out. Just as she ran out of the fu, Zhao Minjing was panting. Her chest was stuffy and the sweat on her forehead slid down her cheeks one by one. It flowed to the wound, and there was a slight pain. Zhao Minjing casually reached out and touched it. Suddenly, she was shocked and looked at her palm. There was blood on her palm. Her face was injured. Suddenly, the sinister smile of Mo Qingfeng when she patted her face flashed in front of her eyes. Her heart tightened and she reached out to touch the painful place again. It was fine if she didn't touch it. This time, her whole face was in pain and blood kept flowing. What happened? What did Mo Qingfeng do to her? Zhao Minjing covered her face. The blood on her face was like a blood vessel bursting and kept flowing out. The panicked and angry Zhao Minjing wanted to go back and ask Mo Qingfeng clearly. Just as she turned around, the pain in her heart made her unable to breathe. Her body suddenly stiffened. The anger in her eyes was replaced by fear. She wanted to move, but her body was so stiff that she couldn't move. Her throat seemed to be blocked by something hard. She couldn't swallow or breathe. Her stiff body slowly fell back. Her eyes were wide open and full of fear. Her consciousness became more and more blurred. Mo Qingfeng's cold voice sounded in her ears. Go down and be the concubine of the king of hell. Du Wenjun's figure was like the wind. She came to stand beside Chu Mukin. After looking at Chu Mukin deeply, she followed his gaze and looked at the purple figure. How is she? Chu Mukin asked coldly. Du Wenjun's eyes flashed with a touch of complexity. Madame Zhao died on the street as soon as she left the manor. Her body was stiff and her eyes were full of fear. It made people think that she died from excessive shock. When Chu Mukin heard this, his eyes suddenly became cold. Mo Qingfeng walked briskly. She thought that when she returned to the cold water pavilion, she would have a good meal and then enter the space to dominate the world. Recently, it liked to stay inside and not come out. When she came out of the space, she had to do something very important. Suddenly, she paused and frowned. Why was there this familiar fragrance in the air? Her eyes turned cold. She turned around abruptly. Chu Mukin, dressed in green, was standing on the wall above her. He looked at her coldly. That gaze seemed to want to devour her. Mo Qingfeng was slightly surprised. She had always been sensitive to her surroundings and what happened. She was very alert. Even if there was an ant crawling on the ground, she could detect it. When did Chu Mukin follow behind her? Did he see what she did to Zhao Minjing? If not, why did he look at her with such a gaze that seemed to want to devour her? Mo Qingfeng raised his chin slightly. So what if he saw it? It wasn't something to be ashamed of. 8th Wangya, are you following me for no reason? Who the hell are you? Chu Mukin's voice was extremely cold, like a 1,000-year-old cold river. Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng replied to him with the same cold words. Who else could she be? You don't know what's good for you. As soon as his voice fell, Mo Qingfeng felt a strong murderous aura coming towards her. Her eyes turned cold. She tapped her toes lightly and jumped up in an instant, landing on the roof behind her. Bang! The moment her body left the ground, the place where she stood was suddenly hit by a powerful cyclone. The ground shook and even the wall next to her cracked. Chu Mukin was slightly surprised. He did not expect that his move was so fast that Mo Qingfeng could dodge it. Mo Qingfeng stood on the roof. A gust of wind blew, her purple clothes fluttered and her black hair fluttered. She looked at Chu Mukin coldly and sneered. Wangye, don't you know how to be gentle to a woman? You're really cruel to me. Chu Mukin ignored her mockery and continued to ask coldly. Tell me your true identity and I will spare your life. She said she was Mo Qingfeng. Would he believe that she was Mo Qingfeng? Nothing in the Mo manor could escape his grasp, let alone the seventh miss of the Mo manor. Mo Qingfeng's background was there. He investigated it very clearly. She was weak and incompetent since childhood. She was raised in the boudoir. How could she know how to use poison? How could she have this cultivation? Even if the timid Miss Mo Qi knew medicine, it was impossible for her to know martial arts. Ever since she was resurrected, she was completely different from the Mo Qingfeng of the past. Whether it was the tone of voice or the way of doing things, they were two completely different people. How could he believe that they were the same person? Mo Qingfeng's lips curved into a deep sneer. Chu Mukin, should I laugh at your stupidity or your stubbornness? If I don't want to tell you, it's useless no matter how many times you ask. It seems that you admit it. You're not Mo Qingfeng at all. A cold voice sounded. His palm exerted strength and suddenly hit Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng's figure flashed and dodged the murderous aura. Before she could make a move, another murderous aura came. Damn this man. How could he use such a fast and ruthless move on a woman? Did he really want to take her life? Mo Qingfeng dodged wave after wave of attacks. As soon as she steadied herself, she gathered strength in her palms and then flew up. Her speed was as fast as the wind as she attacked Chu Mukin. At this time, she only had one thought. Since this man was so ruthless, then don't blame her for being merciless. If he didn't die, how could she let him go? Chu Mukin didn't dodge. He wanted to test her skills. He stood on the wall and looked at her coldly. When she got close, he suddenly gathered internal energy in his palm to meet her head-on. The two powerful and fatal forces collided and made a loud noise. Mo Qingfeng's body was sent flying. She felt a sudden pain in her chest and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Chapter 1496. Chu Mukin's body also suffered a bit of backlash. His arms were a little numb, and he looked at the purple shadow that formed a strange and beautiful arc in the air with a complicated gaze. With this palm, he could roughly test her cultivation. She had been practicing martial arts for about 10 years. So, how old was Mo Qingfeng when she started practicing martial arts? Chu Mukin guessed this point correctly. Mo Qingfeng received all kinds of training from the age of 8. Maupassant loved her, but he was very strict with his children. Mo Qingfeng was very obedient and could endure any kind of hardship. She especially liked exciting and difficult training. She had to complete what others couldn't complete. She was a little competitive. Coming here, her martial arts were enough to protect her. Mo Qingfeng also didn't expect that after coming here and becoming Mo Qingfeng, her training kept improving. She even knew Qigong. There were many moves that she didn't know, but she could use them when she fought. She was surprised by herself. Du Wenjun, who had been standing silently not far away, looked at Chu Mukin with complicated and anxious feelings. The princess consort was about to fall from the air to the ground, and he still went to catch her. This master really didn't know how to be gentle with a woman. Mo Qingfeng wanted to struggle and jump. She didn't want to fall to the ground in front of Chu Mukin, but her arms were in pain and her chest was stuffy. She couldn't exert any strength at all. She could only watch herself fall slowly. Suddenly, her body became light and a warm feeling came from behind. Mo Qingfeng looked up and was shocked. It was him. Duge Zinan was still dressed in black. He carried her and flew to the roof. His black hair and clothes fluttered. When he appeared, the whole world seemed to lose its brilliance. Even the noble and cold Chu Mukin was inferior to him. He stood on the roof with Mo Qingfeng in his arms. His cold eyes were as hot as fire, like a god looking down at Chu Mukin below the wall. Mo Qingfeng looked up at him. His handsome face was frightening. She had an illusion that Chu Mukin was just an insignificant pawn in his eyes. She looked at Chu Mukin again. His shocked expression returned to its original indifference as he looked over coldly. The Eighth Lord's residence was heavily guarded. How could this man appear so easily? And the way he looked at Chu Mukin was like a god, as if he was the only one in the whole world. His high and mighty aura made Chu Mukin very unhappy. Chu Mu Chen's eyes darkened. Without saying a word, he attacked Duge Zinan fiercely. Duge Zinan's cold face didn't have much of an expression. He carried Mo Qingfeng and flew into the air, avoiding Chu Mukin's killing move that was like a wild dragon. He circled in the air and then steadily landed on the roof. One purple and one black formed a beautiful scenery. After standing up, Duge Zinan waved his white sleeve and a red light quickly attacked Chu Mukin like a bolt of lightning. Chu Mukin quickly gathered his strength, and the faint purple light in his palm shot out, colliding with the incoming red light. Bang! The two cyclones collided in the air like a bomb exploding. The air was filled with a thick smell of gunpowder. Chu Mukin was hit by the force of the collision. His body landed on the roof and he took 4 or 5 steps back in a sorry state. On the opposite side, Duge Zinan was still holding Mo Qingfeng calmly, but his eyes were cold and murderous. Mo Qingfeng, who is he? Chu Mukin's eyes coldly looked at Mo Qingfeng, who was tightly hugging Duge Zinan. Such a powerful man, it made him think of the frightening Duge Fort Master. Mo Qingfeng laughed flirtatiously in Duge Zinan's arms. So funny. If you want to know who he is, just ask him. Why are you asking me? She looked up at Duge Zinan. I also don't know who he is. Amidst the smoke of gunpowder, her enchanting smile seemed especially strange. Duge Zinan lowered his eyes and looked at her deeply. He really wanted to tear off that black and red face of hers. It was so ugly. Hurry up. Hurry up. Suddenly, the guards of the 8th Marquis Palace heard the noise here. The leader of the guards brought his brothers to gather here. When they saw Chu Mukin and Du Wenjun, and the ghostly shadow on the roof, they were all stunned. What was going on? Du Wenjun gave the leader a look, indicating that they should not rush up. Even if they wanted to protect their master, they were not the opponent of the man in black. It would only increase the casualties. Receiving Du Wenjun's look, the leader could only retreat with all the guards and silently looked at Chu Mukin and the others. Duge Zinan coldly glanced at them, contempt flashing in his eyes. Duge Zinan. Chu Mukin's cold voice sounded again. It was rumored that Duge Zinan was a devil. He killed people without batting an eye and sucked human blood. No one dared to approach within 100 miles of Dugu Fort except for the people of Dugu Fort. Chu Mukon had never fought with him before, but the noble domineering aura on him had a trace of dark aura. If he was not Dugu Zai Nan, then he was the deputy fort master of Dugu Fort, Yi Chinchuan. Dugu Zai Nan did not speak. He was cold and arrogant, and even looked at Chu Mukon with contempt. His silence made Chu Mukon even more certain that he was Dugu Zai Nan, the rumored devil. She is my princess. Let her go. Chu Mukon coldly glanced at Mo Qingfeng. Women were really troublesome. Even the fort master of Dugu Fort was attracted. Dugu Zai Nan coldly snorted and said domineeringly, "From the beginning to the end, she was my woman. When did she become your princess?" Mo Qingfeng's face twitched. She looked at Dugu Zai Nan in astonishment. When did she become his woman? From the beginning to the end. He said it as if they were very close. Chu Mukon frowned. His handsome face was even more malicious. Men were the most possessive. Even if he didn't like Mo Qingfeng, he would still be unhappy when he saw her close to other men. Not to mention, when he heard Dugu Zai Nan's words, the cold aura emitted from his body became even stronger. Even Du Wenjun could feel that the temperature of the air was gradually dropping. Hero Dugu, you really know how to joke. When did my princess become your woman? Chu Mukon said as he attacked Dugu Zai Nan. He also wanted to attack Mo Qingfeng, but Dugu Zai Nan easily blocked him. The more Dugu Zai Nan protected Mo Qingfeng, the angrier Chu Mukon was. The more Chu Mukon wanted to hurt Mo Qingfeng, the colder Dugu Zai Nan's eyes became, and his moves became more ruthless. In the end, the tragedy became more and more intense. They fought fiercely, and a thick murderous aura spread in the air. Chu Mukon, who originally wanted to attack Mo Qingfeng, finally focused on attacking Dugu Zai Nan. Put me down first. Mo Qingfeng struggled to get out of Dugu Zai Nan's arms. It was easy for him to hold her and fight, but Chu Mukon wasn't someone to be trifled with. If they wanted to fight or kill, then get lost. Don't drag her in. Dugu Zai Nan's eyes were cold. I won't let him hurt you. His arms around her slender waist tightened. Mo Qingfeng frowned. Let me go. It's safer for me to enter the space. At this time, Du Wenjun also joined the fight. Bai Shuling, who had just rushed over, also joined in without saying anything. The three of them fought against him. Bai Shuling was good at swords, and Du Wenjun was good at beast-like attacks. Although they weren't Dugu Zai Nan's opponent, he was worried that they would hurt her. When he heard Mo Qingfeng say that she would enter the space, he moved back and put Mo Qingfeng down. Protect yourself well. After saying this, Dugu Zai Nan flew over to meet Chu Mukon's fierce attack. Without her in his arms, Dugu Zai Nan didn't have any distractions. He stood in the air and waved his hand. Two red lights hit Du Wenjun and Bai Shuling's chests. They spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily from the air, landing on the ground. Bai Shuling wanted to get up, but her heart hurt and she spat out another mouthful of blood. Quick! Go and protect the prince. Bai Shuling shouted at the guard leader. The stunned guards immediately reacted and surrounded him. Mo Qingfeng wanted to enter the space, but seeing how exciting the fight was, she couldn't bear to leave. The guards who rushed up were quickly beaten back by Dugu Zai Nan. Chu Mukon attacked him fiercely. The two graceful figures fought fiercely in the air. The collision of the two forces made an earth-shattering sound and dazzling fire. Mo Qingfeng, who was squatting on the roof, looked up and her eyes twitched. Why did it feel like she was watching fireworks in the daytime? Gradually, Chu Mukon was at a disadvantage. A cold light flew out from Dugazay Nan's body and hit Chu Mukin's chest. Chu Mukin's body spun in the air. Master. Du Wenjun, who was seriously injured, desperately flew to catch Chu Mukin, who was in a sorry state but didn't lose his elegance. In the air, Dugazay Nan stood in the air and looked down at them coldly. After making sure that Chu Mukin couldn't resist, he turned his head and looked at Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng waved at him, then flew towards the Coldwater Pavilion. Dugazay Nan's eyes flashed and he chased after her. Mo Qingfeng smiled evilly. He came today to ask her to leave the 8th prince's residence with him, right? Did he think it would be so easy to take her away? With a thought, Mo Qingfeng entered the 9 Dragon Ball space. Dugazay Nan, who was flying in the air, stopped on a branch of a big tree. He frowned and clenched his fists in his sleeves. Damn woman, she actually dared to enter the space to avoid him. Mo Qingfeng, who was in the space, suddenly sneezed. She rubbed her nose and smiled knowingly. Scold her all you want, she won't feel pain. She came to the wooden barrel next to the spiritual spring and stood there. She put her hands on her hips and smiled at World Dominator. You're still soaking. I think you're addicted to it. World Dominator, who was soaking in the spiritual spring, heard her voice and lazily opened his eyes to look at her. Then, he closed his eyes again. You're getting more and more arrogant. You're even ignoring me. Mo Qingfeng gritted her teeth and said. She thought that World Dominator was soaking comfortably in the spiritual spring and ignoring her. She was a little angry. A few years later, she found out that he wasn't ignoring her on purpose. He was cultivating. World Dominator still ignored her. He closed his eyes and soaked in the spiritual spring. He didn't even want to move. Mo Qingfeng was so angry that her lips curled up. He ignored her, but she couldn't be bothered with him. She also needed to soak in the spiritual spring to improve her cultivation. If Dugazay Nan didn't appear in time, Mo Qingfeng would definitely be injured by Chu Mukin. Chu Mui, this man, was really ruthless. No matter what, Mo Qingfeng was his consort. He actually did it. Chapter 1497. Soaking in the spiritual spring, Mo Qingfeng's skin was as pink as a peach blossom. The muscle revitalizing ointment, which was the same color as the birthmark on her left cheek, gradually melted when it touched the spiritual spring. She washed her face, and all the muscle revitalizing ointment was washed away. She got up, put on her clothes, and sat down at the dressing table. She redecorated the space and placed a dressing table on the soft stick next to the spiritual spring. This place was as warm as her bedroom. No, it was even warmer than her simple bedroom in the Coldwater Pavilion. Sitting in front of the dressing table and looking at herself in the bronze mirror, Mo Qingfeng couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth, revealing a satisfied smile. In the mirror, she was no longer the ugly woman with the yin-yang face. After the muscle revitalizing ointment melted, what appeared in front of everyone was a beautiful face. Her beautiful eyes were clear and bright with a touch of coquettishness. Her facial features were exquisite, her face was like a peach blossom, round and smooth, and her skin was like ice and jade. Mo Qingfeng reached out and gently pinched the left side of her face. It was full of elasticity. Comparing the two faces, there was no trace of the yin-yang face. She cured the yin-yang face with her own brilliant medical skills and acupuncture skills. She felt very accomplished. With a beautiful face like a fairy, who would dare to call her an ugly woman in the future? Who would dare to laugh at her as an ugly woman in the future? Coming out of the space, she was wearing a light green dress. Holding the dominator of the world in her arms, she gently stroked it and walked out of the bedroom with light steps. Her movements were as graceful as the spring breeze. Seeing her come out, Bai Shuling, who was standing behind Chu Mukin, flashed her eyes and a touch of surprise flashed in her eyes. Even if the princess was wearing a veil, it still couldn't hide her beauty, and it could cover up the shortcomings of her Enyang face. As soon as she came out of the space, she felt the oppressive atmosphere in the bedroom. She also smelled a faint fragrance. Mo Qingfeng knew that Chu Mukin was here. Mo Qingfeng smiled indifferently. He must be here to denounce her. Chu Mukin sat at the table in a brocade robe. His cold face seemed to be covered with a thin layer of ice, cold and frightening. His face was a little pale, but he still had the air of a king. He was still noble. Sigh, Mo Qingfeng really didn't like him like this. Her uncle Gu Yanhao, the president of a country, was not like Chu Mukin, who always put himself in a high position and always looked at her with a look of contempt. Didn't the original owner have an ugly Enyang face? Did he have to hate her so much? It wasn't the original owner's fault that she was ugly. Which girl didn't want to be beautiful? It wasn't her fault that the original owner loved him. She loved him, so he didn't have to marry her. She really couldn't understand this man's thoughts. Mo Qingfeng felt that she didn't want to see him anymore. Mo Qingfeng sat down opposite him, and her clear and bright eyes held a faint smile. Chu Mukin, you don't look well. You're hurt badly, right? Do you want me to give you a pill? Chu Mukin looked up and glanced at her coldly. He pursed his thin lips. How do you know Du Gezinen? What's your relationship? Have you already killed the 7th young miss of the Mo clan? Are you pretending to be Mo Qingfeng? Other than this, Chu Mukin really couldn't figure out why his princess consort suddenly became so powerful. He didn't know Mo Qingfeng for a day or two. How could he not know how strong Mo Qingfeng was? When he fought with her today, he knew that she had been accumulating strength for almost 10 years. When did Mo Qingfeng have such a high cultivation? And Mo Qingfeng didn't know Du Gezinen. Mo Qingfeng raised an eyebrow. I think you're most concerned about your injuries right now. Your face is pale, and your injuries are not light. Also, why did I pretend to be Mo Qingfeng? Chu Mukin, I'm Mo Qingfeng. Her soul had crossed over, this wasn't an impersonation. Chu Mukin looked at her coldly, but his mood was inexplicably better. He said coldly, you're concerned about this king. If you're concerned about this king, you shouldn't go against this king, and shouldn't be with Du Gezinen. Ha, Chu Mukin, I'm not concerned about you. I don't want you to get to the bottom of my matters. You always appear in front of me and make me annoyed. Also, I didn't go against you. It's you who went against me. Also, your concubines went against me. I've never taken the initiative to offend them, but if they offend me, I'll pay them back. Hearing that she wasn't concerned about him, Chu Mukin's eyes deepened, and his voice became even colder. You're this king's princess consort. You should care about this king. Is it wrong for me to ask about you being with another man? Is this annoyance? Mo Qingfeng sneered. She looked at Chu Mukin's eyes and emphasized again. Chu Mukin, you have to understand that I'm not your princess consort. Whoever goes through the wedding ceremony with me is my husband. You didn't even go through the wedding ceremony with me. How can you be my husband? When you say this, I just want to laugh, ah. Chu Mukin's face sank. His eyes couldn't help but fall on the rooster in her arms. Damn it, when he saw it this time, it was more beautiful and dazzling than last time. Its body seemed to be glowing, and of course, it was more dazzling. Chu Mukin raised his eyebrows and asked unhappily. You've decided that the rooster is your husband in this lifetime. Also, what the hell was that, haha? Mo Qingfeng didn't answer. She just looked at him coldly. With her cold eyes, no one could guess what she was thinking. Chu Mukin pursed his lips. A complicated look flashed across his handsome face. He said in a low voice, "If you mind that this king didn't go through the wedding ceremony with you at that time, this king is willing to make it up to you." Bai Shuling's face changed slightly when she heard this. She looked at Chu Mukin in surprise. What was the prince doing? Was he confessing to the princess consort? She looked at Imo Qingfeng again and saw her frowning. Her displeasure and disdain could be seen in her beautiful eyes. The princess consort didn't like the prince. Imo Qingfeng was only slightly startled. She quickly understood Chu Mukin's words. He must have been moved by her. Imo Qingfeng snorted and looked at Chu Mukin coldly. She said word by word, "Chu Mukin, do you think you can make up for lost feelings? Maybe you have the ability to bring a dead person back to life, but can you bring a dead person back to life? The moment you allowed Yi Qingyun and Zhao Minjing to beat me to death, my heart was already dead. Even if you want to make up for it, you won't have the chance. On the day of the wedding, you let Zhao Minjing come out with a rooster and let everyone laugh at me. When I became the laughingstock of Chu Qianhua, I only had hatred and disgust for you. I don't care about you, the 8th prince, and I don't care about the identity of the 8th princess consort. I'll say it again, you didn't go through the wedding ceremony with me. You're not my husband, I'm not your princess consort. In the future, my matters are not up to you." Leaning forward, Imo Qingfeng looked at him mockingly. She said slowly, word by word, "You also don't have the right to care about my matters. We've never had any relationship. If I want to be with good Zhe Nan, or even with other men, you don't have the right to care. If you feel lonely and empty, you can take a concubine. I won't care about you." Imo Qingfeng. Enough. Chu Mukin was so angry that the veins on his forehead were popping. His eyes were dark. Her beautiful and cold eyes made him even angrier. In his anger, he reached out to grab her veil. Chapter 1498. Imo Qingfeng wanted to dodge, but she was a bit slower than him. She didn't expect Chu Mukin to suddenly grab her veil, so the veil had already fallen into Chu Mukin's slender fingers. In an instant, he and Bai Shuling were both stunned. They looked at the fairy-like Imo Qingfeng in shock. When the veil fell, the whole room seemed to have bloomed like 100 flowers. It was breathtaking. Her yin-yang face was gone. Bai Shuling was so shocked that she almost shouted out loud. Her mouth was wide open. Was this peerless woman really that ugly Imo Qingfeng? Even Chu Mukin lost his composure. His breathing became erratic as he stared at Imo Qingfeng in a daze. His jade-like face was peerless. When he saw this face, he immediately felt that she was 100 times prettier than him. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. On the other hand, Imo Qingfeng sat there calmly and looked at Chu Mukin with a faint smile. "You're not Imo Qingfeng." Chu Mukin came back to his senses and was even more suspicious of her identity. Even his tone was full of certainty. "You can think of it that way. Whether I'm Imo Qingfeng or not, you won't be my husband." Imo Qingfeng said lightly. She couldn't control his thoughts. When he saw her beautiful face, he wouldn't believe that she was Imo Qingfeng. She didn't want to emphasize anything. The surprise in Chu Mukin's eyes faded and was replaced by his usual indifference. "I'll ask you again. Who are you? What do you want to do by sneaking into the residence?" "Sneak into the residence." Imo Qingfeng didn't like these words, but she didn't explain. She got up and looked at Chu Mukin proudly. "No matter how many times you ask, I won't answer any of your questions. Chu Mukin, don't bother me if you can help it. I don't want to see you at all." "Stop. Where are you going?" "Leaving the residence." Mo Qing spat out these two words calmly, but did not stop. Mo Qingfeng, can you walk out of the residence without my permission? Chu Mukin sneered, and gave Bai Shuling a look. Bai Shuling's body flashed, and suddenly appeared in front of Mo Qingfeng, blocking her. Mo Qingfeng stood there with a cold smile on her beautiful face, which made Bai Shuling's heart tremble. She looked at Chu Mukin, only to see him stand up and stand behind Mo Qingfeng, playing with the scarf in his hand. His cold face seemed to be smiling, and no one knew what he was thinking. If I want to leave, can you stop me? Mo Qingfeng smiled coldly. You're not even Duge Zainan's opponent, what can you do to me? Chu Mukin smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Isn't it because your martial arts skills are higher than Duge Zainan's? I'll spar with you, Mo Qingfeng. Chu Mukin emphasized the words, Mo Qingfeng, as if he was reminding Mo Qingfeng that she was Mo Qingfeng. Mo Qingfeng looked up. In the air, the huge iron blood bat gently flapped its wings. On its back, Duge Zainan stood straight like a ghost. His body emitted a layer of white light, as if he was a god above the 9 heavens, looking down on all living things. As long as he's stronger than you, it's fine. Mo Qingfeng said with a smile, then swiped her 5 fingers in front of Bai Shuling's eyes. Before Bai Shuling could react to what she was going to do, a delicate fragrance suddenly assailed her nose. Upon smelling this fragrance, her consciousness immediately became blurry, and she felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. Mo Qingfeng looked at her contemptuously. With a tap of her foot, her beautiful figure flew up. Damn it! When Chu Mukin felt that something was wrong, Mo Qingfeng's body had already flown into the air. It was too late for him to chase after her. If it was in the past, it would not be a problem to chase after her, but today he was seriously injured, and the opponent was Duge Zainan. Chu Mukin stood there in annoyance and did not chase after her. In the air, Duge Zainan elegantly controlled the iron blood bat. The iron blood bat flew forward, and when it was not far from Mo Qingfeng, Duge Zainan jumped. Mo Qingfeng's waist tightened, and she fell into his arms. He hugged her and spun twice in the air, in a graceful posture, and then slowly landed on the iron blood bat's back. Prince, the princess is leaving just like that. Aren't you going to chase after her? The delicate fragrance disappeared, and Bai Shuling also woke up. When she saw Duge Zainan take Mo Qingfeng away, why did she feel that the princess would never come back again? Chu Mukin looked up in that direction, and there was not a trace of emotion on his cold face. You can leave. This prince wants some peace and quiet. This woman, Mo Qingfeng, had repeatedly disobeyed his wishes, and it made him very annoyed. But your injury. Bai Shuling looked at Chu Mukin worriedly. It's fine. Chu Mukin waved his hand, indicating for her to leave. Bai Shuling pursed her lips, and a trace of worry flashed through her eyes. She could only leave silently. The emerald green mountain peak, the azure sky, and the rippling lake. The swaying willows by the lake danced in the wind. Coupled with the clear and distant sound of the zither, it was like a fairyland. In the drunken immortal pavilion, Duge Zainan, dressed in white, sat quietly in front of the zither table. His slender fingers, like white jade, elegantly played on the zither strings. The breeze blew his fine black hair. Looking at it like this, he looked like a fairy. Mo Qingfeng stood leaning against the pillar of the pavilion. She was not proficient in ancient music. But the sound of this man playing the zither was really too beautiful. In this fairyland-like environment, playing such a clear and distant song was quite elegant and quiet. After the song, Duge Zainan's white hand stroked the zither, and the zither on the table was put away by him. You played very well. Why did you stop? Mo Qingfeng turned around and met his sharp but not cold eyes. Dugazinin stood up, and his perfect lips curled into an elegant arc. If you play for too long, you will feel bored. Mo Qingfeng pursed her lips. After leaving the 8th prince's mansion, he directly brought her here. Then, after eating snacks and drinking a few cups of tea, he played the zither here. He had played for more than 2 hours. To be honest, she was indeed a bit bored. Dugazinin, you always say that you will take me away from the 8th prince's mansion. Where exactly are you taking me? Mo Qingfeng took 2 steps forward and looked into his eyes. She did not want to go back to the 8th prince's mansion and the Mo mansion. She had already dealt with the people who needed to be dealt with. Even if Dugazinin did not appear, she planned to leave. She was tired of seeing that Chumukin. Next, she wanted to find Oyuding. But before that, she wanted to figure out what was the relationship between her, the O family, and the dragon-taming spiritual pearl. What did Dugazinin mean when he said those words to her when she just arrived here? Could he really take her back to the modern world? She missed her family so much. Damn it, she also missed that guy Mu Xiao. Return to the Duga castle. Dugazinin said. His eyes were as clear as water, and his voice was as pleasant as the music he played just now. When Mo Qingfeng heard this, the corner of her mouth twitched. So, it was not to return to the modern world. Mo Qingfeng muttered. Did she need some dragon-taming spiritual pearl to return to the modern world? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.